And we'll get started. Attend, O reader, our tale of wonder, and welcome back to Paper Cuts. Last week we got a brand new thing for the podcast, and that was reading a brand new book. That's right, we read an excerpt from Guarding Gus. And Guarding Gus, in a nutshell, if you don't have the time to go back and listen to the episode, is about two young men who live in Portland, an urban fantasy version of Portland, if you will, and they have discovered a little gargoyle who was on his way to go be decorative somewhere when, surprise, mob activity happened and the people carrying him got scared off. And we were about to find out. We were about to find out. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? I hate when I lose a word right in the middle of my spiel. Um, we're about to find out what goes on in chapter 5 because, surprise, the version of chapter 5 we got last week was not the full chapter. Isn't that startling? But, it was on me. It was the way I had converted the book. The author very graciously was like, go ahead, finish the thing you have. Uh, and I'm very excited to see how this chapter ends. So we're going to read all of chapter 5 again. And it's going to be very fun. And then after we read chapter 5, we're going to dive in to that issue of Astounding Stories that started in last week's episode. We got a little ways into the August issue of Astounding Stories, and then we ran out of time for the week. And I'm very excited to see what's going on between those pages, because there's definitely some great stories there. That's my favorite part of reading these issues of Astounding Stories, is finding something that you just never would have read otherwise. And it continues to this day. These serialized magazines full of stories, they are, I believe I heard someone describe them as an embarrassment of riches at one point, and I really love that phrasing because they're just fantastic, and you wouldn't expect them to be. These amateur authors who are doing it for the love of writing are submitting to these little, magazine journals and being like, hi, can you print my short story? And so being used to getting full novels, from experienced authors in your life, you don't expect them to be any good, but there's such fantastic concepts in there. Just the other day, actually, I checked out a short story collection from my local library, and you all know me, I'm a known enjoyer of the local library. Uh, and so I use it for a lot of my scouting for what's coming up. And I read a fantastic science fiction story yesterday about, essentially, the premise was, at some point in the near future, medical technology becomes good enough that when you experience a large medical trauma, sorry, there was a beep outside. I want to make sure that wasn't for me. Yeah, no. Because sometimes I forget to turn off the lights on my car, and my car is how the internet works here. Nah, we're good. Somebody will knock if it's a real problem. Which we've had happen on the show before, by the way. Check out, what were we reading while I was in Albuquerque? I believe it was 20,000 Leagues, or it was right after 20,000 Leagues. Around that time, we were we were reading, and I had a neighbor come up to the door and knock on the door, and they were like, "Hey, I also drive an electric car. Did you mean to do that?" I'm like, "Yes, don't worry, thank you." And I always appreciate that because it's someone looking out for me. They're trying to, have my day not be ruined by my car suddenly having run itself dry, and I appreciate it. Where was I, though? I was telling a story. It's true, goodly neighbors. Uh, you would be surprised at how pleasant neighbors can be in an RV park. There a lot of them are people who are, here for a week or two on vacation, and so they're in a very good mood, and so they have enough time to help somebody out. Or they're people who also live in an RV full time, and they know how it is, and they know how it can be, and so if you are in a situation that you can't fix, if you look distressed enough, it is possible that someone will help you. I've had some very, very helpful neighbors a few times. For example, one of the times I was in the Bay Area, right? Library decided that he wanted to see the outside world, and he zooped out while I was carrying groceries in, and I dropped my groceries, and I rushed outside, and I said, "Library, get out from under the house," and he was like, and he was like, hunched down, all tense under the RV, and I like went into the house to get some treats to, lure him out from under the RV. And as I'm stepping out, one of my neighbors has Library by the scruff in one hand and by his back paws in the other, and she hands me Library and goes, "You lost this." And I was like, "Thank you so much, my sweet boy." And I wound up giving her, I was like, "Okay, serious question, do you like jam or do you like pickles better?" And she was like, she thought for a second, and she went, "You know what? I do like pickles." And I'm like, "Oh, actually, these are jalapeno pickles. Do you like spicy?" And she was like, "Oh, yeah, of course." And so I gave her a jar of my jalapeno pickles, and as thanks. And like several other times, I've had helpful neighbors where I've given them something. I've like made them a loaf of bread, or given them a jar of pickles, or a jar of apple butter, this or that. I like to have a few things scattered around the house for that kind of thing. It's just the farm boy in me, I guess. But I digress. I read this really great science fiction story, and like just the concept alone, like I'm just gonna tell you the core concept, nothing else. The core concept was we open in a hospital, and this mom is terrified for the health and safety of her son. But uh, then kind of like the camera pans around, and it's revealed that her son is currently a brain in a brain case and a spinal cord, and that's it. That's all. And then they have the spinal cord wired into some sensory input, and they're trying to, essentially awaken this brain in the brain case from a medically induced coma because it experienced some kind of blunt force trauma. And then as the story goes on, it's revealed that the mother is also a brain in a brain case that the brain case has been then implanted in a body she designed because she had cancer, right? And then it was then an experimental procedure, but she got brain encased, and then she tried to remake her original body, right? But she was experiencing the uncanny valley effect because it wasn't exactly like her original body. It looked exactly like her original body, but it did not function in the same way. Like she was constantly biting her tongue, or like as she was running, her right arm wouldn't swing in the same way. And so she just got so uncanny valley horrified of her own body that she had to then get unimplanted and then reimplanted in a body that she cosmetically designed herself. And then the rest of the short story just plays on information that builds on stuff from that setup. And it's just a random short story just floating around in a random short story collection. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that fantastic? It's science fiction at its absolute peak when it says, "Here's this wild premise. What does it tell us about people?" You know, as I've described it elsewhere, uh, in a little bit different words, wouldn't that be messed up? Anyway, I'm Rod Serling. Uh, I threw that line out on a fellow Codex member's podcast, The Meaning Mine, which actually is a really good listen. Like, most of the time I'm not big on interview podcasts, but I actually really liked being on The Meaning Mine, and it actually made me into a listener. Anyway, I've digressed for what, 10 minutes? Let's get to the book, shall we? But that is the nature of doing this live, is I am very easily distractible and I have 100 million thoughts in my head. You know? We'll see how much of that hits the podcast feed. I like to edit that a little more tightly. But you, the live viewer, you get to come along on the, Donkey Kong Country cart level that is my brain. Let's dive into chapter 5. Oh, sorry. Let me take that again. let's dive into Chapter 5 of Guarding Gus, shall we? Oh, thank you, Savlaki. I'm very pleased with the way my voice sounds. You know, you don't always love the way you sound on a recording because like you only are getting half of what you hear in your actual brain. But you know, I've inoculated myself to hearing my own voice over the years. I've been doing this long enough that I'm just like, yeah, okay, that's how I sound. I don't love it, but it's how I sound. But like, you know, I've put a lot of work into my voice. I took I was multiple years I will all state in choir in high school, and then I went into college and continued to do choir. I almost took a music minor, honestly. Uh, you know, honestly, if the extra year would not have cost me as much as it did, I'd have taken that music minor. I'd have just taken the music history and theory classes and had a music minor. I'd have done it. But, you know, college is expensive, especially the college I went to. But I digress. We could talk about me endlessly, and I don't particularly care to. Let's dive into chapter 5, shall we? Thursday, 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. Nico liked the idea of going to Brant's house to regroup. Brant had the advantage of a 3-story house with an enclosed basement, whereas Nico lived in an apartment complex with curious neighbors. They could keep a closer eye on Gus to try to do some research, and Brant had a spare room for Nico to crash in if he needed it. Oh, I'm going to interrupt myself here. If you were not here last week, in a nutshell, Nico and Brant were leaving separate businesses, right? And as they were going to their cars, well, actually, they were in separate businesses, right? And Nico was looking for a new pair of bonsai shears, and Brant was elsewhere in the hardware store. And then they hear gunfire outside, and because both of them are, you know, security and military, respectively, uh, they both rush out of the hardware store to see what's going on, to see if they can protect any civilians. And the civilians have long since vacated the area. They're from that part of Portland, and so they know what gunshots mean, and it means get the heck out of there. Uh, but you know the gunfight rushes off in a different direction, and so then in this SUV that they've left behind, they find a little gargoyle, a little baby gargoyle. Um, hang on, he looked like this little guy. Um, and they find little Gus, and then they immediately devolve into buddy cop movie shenanigans. They, you know, talk it over and realize that they can probably keep an eye on little Gus very well together. And Brant, being an extrovert, adopts the very introverted Nico. And I'm saying adopt very broadly here. You know how it is. Like, there's sometimes you will have someone that's normally very introverted in your friend group, and you'll be like, how'd they get here? And then you think about it for a little bit, and it's because one of the extroverts in the group has kind of like grabbed onto them and said, this is my introvert. You're coming with me. And that's basically what Brant did here. Is he looks at Nico and goes, you're my introvert. You're coming with me. And then they take little Gus here. Little Gustafer is his full name, which they learn because Gustafer yells his name in the middle of this store that they go to. They go to a Babies R Us, which, by the way, did you know Babies R Us is also reopened? I didn't know that until reading this book. But they go to the Babies R Us and get Sir Gustafer here some baby items, and there's a very cute moment where they're like, where both of them are kind of like, you know, bickering a little bit, and the teller, whose name escapes me, but I do remember that they were non-binary, right? Name starts with an X. Brain smooth. But regardless, the teller's like, "Oh, you two adopt. When did you two adopt Gustafer here?" And they're like, "No, no, 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 no. We're not together. Don't worry about it." It's very cute. And then they eventually decide to regroup, you know, and hide from ostensibly the magic mob at Brant's place. And that's where we're diving into chapter 5 here. Anyway, they doubled back to retrieve Brant's car from the hardware store's neighborhood before caravanning to his house. Brant lived in an area of town known for resting on the top of a dormant caldera, which was much scarier than it sounded. Are they up in St. Helens? Sorry, like, I've been to Portland a couple times, and I'm like, St. Helens is pretty far from the river, if I remember right. Like, obviously St. Helens is dormant, but, like, it's not the only caldera around Portland as well. I digress. It literally is called out at the beginning of the book, like, if you've been to Portland, if you're from Portland, Oregon, see if you can piece together where all they go, smile. There's supposed to be a scavenger hunt link, but the scavenger hunt link is currently busted. The author is in the process of fixing that. Well, presumably between drinks on vacation, which I hope she enjoys that vacation. You know, launching a book is a difficult, expensive endeavor. I hope this book sells plenty of copies to cover her vacation. You know what I mean? Anyway, house on top of dormant caldera. As they carpooled, Nico checked on Gus in the rearview mirror obsessively, but the baby seemed to enjoy the drive, occasional chuffed noises coming from the back seat. Nico tried several times to get Gustafer to speak again, but the gargoyle just looked at him with those shining eyes, grinning and waving his claws around in lazy circles. They finally turned down a residential street, quiet and pleasant. Brant's house was the fifth one down on the left, and he gestured out the window for Nico to pull into the driveway. A side door to the house was clearly evident. Nico pulled in, and Brant walked up to meet him, his car parked on the street. Brant unlocked the side door while Nico extracted baby Gus from the back seat and placed it gently into the baby carrier. As Nico walked in, he was struck with the most incredible smell of baked goods he'd ever experienced in his life. It carried notes of lemon, cinnamon, vanilla, and maple sugar. Maple sugar is a very specific, like, call out in that pile. Like, most people could smell and be like, oh, cinnamon, ooh, vanilla, ooh, lemon, but, like, maple sugar has a very definite taste, but, like, maybe I just haven't used maple sugar in forever, but it doesn't feel like it has a very specific smell. You know what I mean? That's a very good nose on Nico to notice all four of those things. Anyway, it's very evocative too. It's like you read this and you go, oh, I know exactly what that smells like. There were enormous containers of flour, sugar, baking soda, and baking powder, all securely fastened with metal clasps and labeled with Sharpie pen in a neat hand. There was a massive rectangular island too, with storage underneath, crowded with baking bowls of all sizes and materials. He had wood, metal, plastic, and ceramic. Gus immediately squirmed in the carrier, and as soon as Nico put the gargoyle down, Gus fell to pulling out the plastic mixing bowls on the floor and playing with them. Brant swiftly lifted the ceramic bowls up and away, tucking them somewhere safe. The rest of the kitchen was bright and friendly, and the only item that seemed unusual was the double ovens. The youngling and Nico were taking deep breaths and savoring the waves of pure contentment that came along with them. When Nico did open his eyes, Brant was beaming. This is my happy place. I've got a bit of an obsession. Are you joking? I can't remember the last time I smelled something so delicious. What an incredible place. Did you put those ovens in yourself? No, I'm not quite that gifted. The contractor put those in. I'm working on expanding my skills, but it's mostly carpentry right now. Did do a lot of other things in here, though. He walked around the island, pointing out the small improvements to the kitchen that would make a foodie blush. Quiet closed doors, magnetic racks for utensils, a hanging pot rack, hidden compartments for food waste and recycling. Retractable shelving everywhere, but the pièce de résistance was a ceiling-to-floor, multiple-layered, rotating organizer spice cabinet that Brant revered the way that other people fell to hushed tones in the long-room library at Trinity College. Sorry, again, like, I love this. I love the picture that this paints. Also, relatedly, the quiet closed doors are obviously a really, like, good choice. You know, it's just, oh yeah, you just gotta get the right mechanic for it. But, like, you have to plan on retractable shelving. That's a whole thing. And, like, retractable shelving in particular, you have to know what you're gonna put on it, because, like, if those rails are overweighted, the shelves will not move correctly. You know, I like it. I like it a lot. It shows that Brant has a lot of thought into the way he's putting things together. Sorry, I've done a little bit of woodwork myself, so like sometimes, like especially when a character says, "Oh, I do carpentry," I'm like, brain cell, neuron activation. It's not helping that Brant is also a baker because I also bake sometimes. Friendly reminder that I post baking successes in my Discord. Sometimes even baking failures. Honestly, did I spell something wrong? I did. Try that again. Discord. There we go. I do a lot in there. I do a lot in the Discord. Probably more than I should. Post a lot of stuff in there. Recipes, pictures. Pictures of the cats, especially. If you like seeing pictures of my cats, there's plenty of them in there. While the kitchen was clearly the pride and joy of the house, the rest of the home was decently kept. The master bedroom was on the first floor with its own bathroom. The living room had an enormous TV mounted above a fireplace, a recliner, a big squashy couch, and a love seat. It had a friendly and sunny vibe, just like Brant himself, and the intoxicating smell continued to permeate everywhere. Upstairs was a mid-sized spare bedroom with a skylight, a small office, and another full bedroom. Nico spied some military paraphernalia on the wall of the office, but Brant quickly shut the door and mumbled something about it not being clean enough for guests. Nico, to his credit, took the hint and didn't bring it up. As they explored the basement, there was a workout area with a mat, weights, and speaker system. A washer and dryer were tucked against the wall, with a table for folding clothes in front of it, mirroring the setup in the kitchen upstairs. A tall stack of deep storage plastic bins, neatly labeled, were next to the laundry area. Nico could make out some camping equipment on the floor in front of the bins, still covered in dry mud from its last excursion. Good spot, Portland. If you like to camp, there's a lot of like wilderness not far outside the city, because there's like the mountains right there, you know? Gus bounced along on Nico's chest this whole time, growing more alert as they explored each room. He grew fidgety despite Nico's attempts to pacify the baby with rocking, reassurances, or playing with the soft pads under his claws. "Let's go upstairs to the living room and see what we can find online," Brant said, noting Gus' impatience. "I'm sure we can put him down to run around for a bit." "He? What makes you think Gus is a he?" "I don't know. I don't think it actually matters, but for now it's just easier to pick one. Chose he because that's what we are once we know for sure, unless Gus tells us. Will that work?" Nico was secretly relieved that there was now a strong chance that Brant would be okay with him being trans, but was still feeling a little cautious. He did agree regarding Gus, though. It would be rude to keep calling Gus it, after all. This babe had won his way into the hearts already. And so Nico had rescued a stray dog once, and while the feeling was similar, this was much stronger. He wondered if it had to do with Gus being magical, or a gargoyle, or both. "Yeah, that works great," Nico replied as he walked up the basement stairs, heading for the living room. As he was getting settled and freeing Gus, who was jiggling like a jello mold in an earthquake at this point, Brant appeared with a laptop computer from his office on the second floor. Gus leapt onto the ground on all fours, kicking a leg out behind him and galloping around the room, dashing off to the kitchen. "Be careful in there! Don't you dare break anything, kid!" Brant called after him. Brant opened his laptop and started researching the little bit of information they had, the license plate of the SUV. With no way to assist, Nico asked for a pen and paper and started making notes of all the information they'd learned so far. After a few minutes, he started perusing the baby book they'd bought and could hear Gus scurrying from room to room, and other than some suspicious toilet splashing, the toddler remained remarkably easy to care for. They worked in silence for a good 30 minutes, both of them engrossed with their own activities. Engrossed, rather. Engrossed. Finally, Brant gave a sigh. "I'm hitting some dead ends. I'm gonna have to call my buddy at the police station. This'll just take a minute." He gestured to his bedroom, indicating he'd be back momentarily, and Nico gestured to the laptop. Brant nodded his approval and then stepped into his bedroom to make his calls. Nico spent a fruitless 10 minutes online looking for information about live gargoyles and found nothing. They were going to have to fly blind when it came to his care, which did not put Nico's mind at ease. He didn't want to risk Gus's health just because they didn't know what to do. Where did Gus come from? Where was his family? How did Rubra get a hold of him? Nico was so distracted by the enormity of what to do next, he just started to turn his back to his notes. Or rather, he just started to turn back to his notes when he realized it was eerily quiet in the house. Isn't this a bad sign with babies? He thought uneasily. His fear grew as he searched the main floor of the house. No Gus. He dashed up the stairs and came up empty-handed from the spare room and bathroom. He noticed a sliver of light coming from the office and approached it cautiously. Brant had firmly closed the door. Nico was sure of it. He opened the door, slowly scanning the room. Gus was sitting quietly on the floor, gazing up at a display on the wall. Nico walked closer and saw that Gus wasn't hurt, and the room appeared undisturbed, but still the babe gazed up at the display again, and then looked meaningfully at Nico. Nico studied the display closer, and a picture of Brant in full army regalia, standing stiff as a board, looking stern and intimidating, and totally unlike the man Nico had met today. There was a medal in the display, along with his bar of rank, but Nico didn't know what this signified. He just knew that Brant didn't want them both to see it. He scooped Gus up gently and started to lead out of the office, but when he turned back, Brant was standing in the doorway. I had a vibe that Brant was army, right? Because, like, you know how it is. Like, each branch of the armed forces kind of has their own little vibe. And I was like, Brant seems like an army guy. Like, he's it wouldn't shock me. Like, he doesn't act like a Navy guy. Like, he's on a coast, so, like, it wouldn't shock me if he was Navy. But, like, he didn't act like he was Navy. I don't know anything about the Coast Guard other than that they deal with the public, and that's a horrible job for them. He wasn't Marines. He's not. He doesn't have that energy. Don't get me wrong. Brant seems to have a little bit of that himbo juice that people find very popular today, but he is not thick-headed enough to be a Marine. And so it's like, and he's obviously not Air Force. Like, I'll just leave that there. So, like, obviously he's got to be Army. Like, I was thinking Army or Navy, but, like, he's not really Navy. You know what I mean? So, I'm glad that my prejudices have been affirmed. Anyway, Brant liked Nico. He liked Gus particularly, and he liked the idea of a new adventure to take his mind off the food truck construction and his usual broody thoughts. The part he didn't like was having to talk to one of his unit again at the police station. He'd given his blood, sweat, tears, and darn near his soul to the United States government when he fought in the Iraqi War for 3 tours over 5 years. He was done with that life. Becoming a civilian again was somehow harder than being a soldier, but ever since he discovered his love and knack for baking, well, he never looked back. He clung to it the way a rock climber does to a sheer wall face, only with 2 fingers and the desperate, time-frozen will keeping you alive. See, that's what I mean. I'm like, okay, yeah, he's, like, I don't know, there's just a very specific way that Army in particular go about grabbing hold of a hobby and strangling it, you know? Like, and I mean that in the best way. Like, don't get me wrong, that's something that a lot of vets do generally, is they pick up a hobby as a way to get back into civilian life, because it's a good way to, like, decompress from having been essentially always on for your whole tours. But, like, Army go about it in a very particular way. You know, it's usually something. I'm saying this with the most love in my heart. It's usually something they can monetize. But I digress. I could spend way too long off topic on that, and we don't want to do that. Baking was always a good investment. People enjoyed baked goods when they were celebrating, or people enjoyed baked goods when they were celebrating small wins or recovering from big losses, like the post office, rain or shine. Well, in this mountain town, it was more rain than shine. There was no slow season. It was creative, experimental, and a wide range of options were available from every culture on Earth. And more importantly, it kept Brant from going off the deep end. It's interesting because Portland has one, like, a part of the year as we go into, like, what's traditionally winter, it absolutely gets obliterated with rain. And so it is more rain than shine. But, like, depending on the time of year when you go to Portland, it doesn't rain as much as you'd expect. That said, I tend to wind up in Portland right as rainy season is starting. Like, for context, I was in Portland for 2 weeks, right? Pretty recently. And there was 4 days it didn't rain, maybe. Like, it was absolutely dumping rain. And, like, on the days it did not rain, it looked like it wanted to rain real bad. If I'd been a little farther to the coast, it probably would have done a little bit of coastal rain. Because you know how it is, like, if you're on a coast, the rain comes in from the ocean and it's, like, not enough substantial rain to be like, oh man, it's raining. But it's like, just enough. Or maybe that's just the Bay Area. The Bay Area is really the only place I've been that I've been close enough to the ocean consistently to have that. I digress. This book is very distracting. Brant had entered the service quite young and impressionable, straight out of his sheltered Midwestern small town. It's the age-old tale. Boy has dreams of glory, boy tries to impress his family, boy gets his optimism dashed on the battlefield. There was nothing special about what happened to Brant. He'd seen enough senselessness to know that he'd only survived because of a mix of faint common sense and random dumb luck. Not everyone in his unit was so lucky. The thing that made Brant special was how he was coping with it. When he left home, he had a terrible apartment, no life experience or partner to speak of, and no direction. When he came home, his grandmother died and left him this beautiful house, her recipe book, and a chance to escape the pit in his heart that the war had left there. Brant had struggled for the last 10 months, every day scraping by, perfecting his recipes, throwing himself into caring for the house, and working towards a modest goal. Open a food truck, specifically a cookie truck. He wanted to offer cookies, his cookies, out of a mobile truck. That was it. Seems simple, huh? But living alone was so much harder than people made it seem, especially for an extrovert like Brant. He struggled with getting away from his reoccurring dreams of the war at night, and he struggled towards his bakery truck dreams during the day. He'd been considering getting a foster dog in the last few weeks just to cope, but wasn't sure if he was ready. Then he met Nico and Gus. The whole existence of Gustafer, from the moment Brant had seen the little guy, had brought a sense of childlike wonder that was unmatched in its innocence and delight. Brant would protect Gus and this feeling at all costs. As Brant stood in the doorway of his office, which he was certain he had locked, his face fell as he saw Gus and Nico in his private space. Nico had his back facing to Brant. Brant had met a few Latino guys with him Brant had met a few Latino guys with him on tour, but they hadn't been close. Brant didn't want to share this part of his life with strangers. He wanted to pretend that life didn't happen. But Gustafer was staring at Brant, his little arms reaching out to be held. His gaze was compassionate, full of wisdom beyond his years. He seemed to sense Brant's anguish and was radiating a sense of envelopment. Brant felt held all over, which was an accomplishment. He's a big guy. Suddenly, the idea of keeping secrets from these two seemed ridiculous. He couldn't do it. He shouldn't do it. After all, that's what new life was about, making a new start. I gotta lead, was all Brant could manage to say. Let's go downstairs. I'll debrief you. He turned away from Nico and Gus, wincing at the choice of words. It was so cold, the military lingo was slipping in. You'd have to watch that. Nico looked stricken, but followed him down the stairs, quietly. They all got settled in the living room, and before anyone else could, Brant took a deep breath and began first. I'm not mad. Seriously, I don't know what it is about this little dude, but man, he's got a hold on me, cracking me open like an egg. Baker pun. Not a bad one. I'll have to remember that. He shook his head like he was clearing his ears of water. Listen, I was in the military. It was brutal. Nearly destroyed me. I had some dark days, let me tell you. Calling my buddy at the station, who's firmly in denial and pointedly not dealing with it, brought some things up, but He paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts. I've got a new life now that I have fought hard to get. I'll be damned if something's going to threaten that. He said this with finality. He'd kept his eyes on the floor the whole time, but now he looked up, hoping at best to see acceptance, and at worst to see discomfort. Nico, to his credit, was smiling broadly, and Gus's tongue was lolling out of his mouth. Both of them were looking at Brant with a mixture of admiration, friendship, and pride. I have something to talk to you about, too, Nico said simply. As Brant listened intently to Nico share about his transition, his mind was crowded with questions about the process of what it must be like to realize you're not really a girl, but a boy, a man, he corrected himself silently. He wasn't sure what was okay to ask, and he didn't want to offend his new friend. He considered where his questions were coming from and found that they were mostly about wanting details that felt very private to ask a relative stranger. He filed most of his questions under none of his business and landed on the most important one of all, the one that had to be answered. How can I support you? He asked Nico, who had finished speaking and was now looking at Gus, listening actively from Nico's lap. Nico felt his heart constrict at the clear non-judgment in that one sentence. He considered the response when he told his family. His abuelita had stood up from the table and walked off to her room. His mother and father had both shifted uncomfortably, and his father finally spoke and said, Sure, whatever, son, placing a disapproving emphasis on the last word. Just weeks prior, his father had been saying that this was a phase that would pass, while his mother looked on sorrowfully. But at least his mother's face in that moment had taken on some acceptance. She was clearly conflicted by the response from her mother and husband, but a determined glint had come into her eye, and she'd winked at Nico before rising from the table. Nico could hear her say down the hall, Come with me, mi amor. We're going to have a talk about your new son. His mother had also placed an emphasis on the last word, but this one had some protective bite to it. It gave Nico's heart a tiny flame of happiness in the echo of darkness. Listening to Brant's question, however, had given Nico the same flame, this time a little stronger. He didn't know this man. He didn't know his troubles. Hell, he was barely figuring out his new and truest self, and this new friend had a better sense of live and let live than his own father. He slumped in his seat, feeling relief cascade over him in waterfall waves. He felt he had crossed a canyon by simply lifting his feet and was soaring across. I appreciate that, man. I really do. I'll tell you what. Why don't we watch each other's backs? Nico said, smiling and scratching Gus's head at the same time. Deal, said Brant, smiling back. Nico spoke again, but this time with more eagerness than before at the idea of their mission. So, what did your buddy have to share? Before we get into what the buddy had to share, I love that that Karen here has shown us Brant's thought process of a billion questions at once, and then, I probably shouldn't ask those. Those are not relevant. And then, what can I do to help? What can I do to support you? Like, that's such a good model. Like, these days, you are likely to run into a trans person and not know it. You know what I mean? And so, like, having, say this is the first book with this type of theme that somebody's picking up. That's such a good model to give somebody who's never, like, experienced a trans person existing and, like, doesn't know how to be supportive. Because, let's be honest, most people I know, and this is speaking even in the Midwest, most people I know these days, they want to be supportive, especially if they care about you, but they don't know what a landmine certain questions can be. And so, like, having this as a model for someone, as a model of a good reaction, a good attempt at support, is so vital. So I'm really glad at the way this has been handled. Heck, I'm cis, so, like, I'm sure it is much more meaningful to someone who has the life experience, you know? I'm just looking at it from the outside like, dang. I'm glad that there's some support here, you know? But I digress. I just wanted to call that out. I really like that. You know, it's a very useful scene. It not only moves the story forward, but also gives someone something to work with. But I digress. Let's find out what Brant's cop buddy had to say. Brant's face turned somber, but he said, "The license plate register is belonging to Vicidius rubra, and that's both good for us and bad for us. Good for us because that tells us that Gustafer does belong to him in his stupid menagerie. We should try to find him as soon as possible, even if that's not what we want to do." Gustafer had crawled into Brant's lap at this point. Brant looked down, directing his next question to the gargoyle's big ears flapping about. "I don't suppose you have anything to say about that?" Gus's eyes were closed, but he peeked open one lid and glanced up at Brant. Gus was either not understanding Brant or choosing not to answer, and Brant shrugged. Nico brought Brant's attention back by puzzling aloud. "So, what's the bad for us part? And wait, why do we have to return Gus if we know the guy's a bad dude?" Nico was struggling to understand. Brant sighed unhappily. "Well, the truth is, I don't know how he treats his animals. For all I know, they live good lives. So I guess it really comes down to if you want to deal with the consequences of making Rubra angry by trying to keep Gus. And he will be angry, believe me. I, for one, don't believe in stealing other people's stuff. I'd have to clearly see that Gus is in the wrong hands. I don't see any signs of neglect or abuse on him. I mean, little guy's incredible, but..." He pet Gus affectionately between the ears as he trailed off. "What do you think?" Nico considered for a moment. The lines of ownership for animals in the human world were clear. There were domesticated pets, and there were exotic animals. Exotics could be, and sometimes were, kept as pets by the wealthy, which is what he thought was the situation here, but a rare creature, especially one that was new even in the magical world? Nico felt at a loss of where to even begin, and who to ask, much less the legalities of the situation. His head was swimming. Nico nodded at Brant. I agree with you for now. Until Gustafer tells us something, or we see that it's a bad idea, let's proceed with the found dog policy, you know? Let's return Gus to Rubra and not risk his wrath. If something shows us along the way that he's gonna end up abused, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Brant rubbed absent-mindedly at the top of his nose and sighed again. There's a second problem logistically. He's got several dozen businesses around town. He likes to visit them all. So finding him, it'll be a little bit tricky. Probably rule out the day venues. He enjoys his nighttime moneymakers. Brant frowned, concentrating on the notes he'd taken during the call. He also likes to name his businesses after hockey teams. He's a huge hockey fan. Nico remembered something in his pocket, retrieved it, and opened his hand to reveal a matchbook from a bar called Min Wild. He found it in the SUV, but didn't think it was important. He held it out to Brant, who examined it. It was expensive. The matchstick heads were dark green. They could still smell the earthy wood that made the base of the matchstick itself. Nico put two and two together. Let me guess, Minnesota? Ah, you got it. Once you see it, you'll see it everywhere. I guess it's as good a place as any to start. They packed up Gus into Nico's car, a more palpable trust between all three of them. 2 men and a baby gargoyle, I can tell. Alright, that is all we get out of Guarding Gus, unless the author decides that I am a good voice for this book. But we'll see. That's a problem for future Nestor. You know what I mean? I like this book. I really can't wait for it to pass through the like scholastic doodle-doo that lets it go into your local library, which that's in process right now. I have confirmation from the author they're working on it. There's a few details they need to iron out, but soon it will be available for your local library to purchase as a digital copy. And at the bare minimum, you are likely to be capable of getting a physical copy from your local library in December. So, I was really pushing like, yeah, go to your library. It's not out yet. Once again, definitely drop by the Discord. I will probably at everyone when the book gets to local libraries. Uh, honestly, I tend to add everyone very sparingly, but that seems like a good occasion, Yeah, in the meanwhile, keep an ear out here if you don't want to join the Discord. If you're not a Discord type, I get it. It's not for everybody. Keep an ear out here. I will be announcing it on the podcast, and you will get the announcement much earlier if you show up on Friday nights for the live stream, is what I will say. But I really like this book. Not separating the family. Ooh. But yeah, I really like this book so far. I dig it. I think it's got a lot of fun themes that it's working on. It's got a lot of really good setup, and also very fitting, like, to make the big, like, for lack of a better term here, Dawn character like hockey. The Winterhawks are a hockey team based in Portland. A pretty good one, actually. I went when I was up in Portland, right? I had gotten through a family member, I had gotten a ticket to opening night, and the Winterhawks are really good this year. Like, if the opening game has any indication to say, Winterhawks are good this year. Their goalie, I swear, dude made like 3 or 4 saves that I'm like, how did you catch that? How did you do that? Like, they almost shut out the other team, and like the team they almost shut out. Like, it was a really, like, they got a long way ahead out front, and like the other team never really caught up because their defense was, well, their goalie was really good. Their defense generally they could do to be a little better. They're leaning on their goalie, but I digress. They're really good this year, and because like the team they were going up against was a really high seed, so they're likely to be very good this year. So if you like hockey, keep an eye on the Winterhawks. They're good this year. Uh, it's funny actually. The Winterhawks feed into so, like, hockey has leagues in the same way that like baseball has levels of minor league and then the majors, right? And so, like, analogously, uh the Winterhawks are like level 1, right? I think like the B leagues or like the single A leagues, right? And then there's a hockey team in my hometown, uh well, not my hometown, the big city nearest my hometown, right? That the Winterhawks can feed into. There's also a second different hockey team that the Winterhawks can also feed into, and those are roughly equivalent to Double A and Triple A minor league baseball. And then the Triple A team feeds into the NHL team, the Blackhawks. Are they still called the Blackhawks in Chicago? They might have changed that. Chicago hockey team. Oh, they're still called the Blackhawks. I thought they were changing their mascot. I must be thinking of, one of the 5 other sports teams that went, we maybe shouldn't do this anymore recently. But yeah, essentially the Winterhawks feed into 2 different teams. I don't know the literal league names because I'm not much of a hockey follower, but I'll go if there's a live game in town. You know what I mean? But the Winterhawks in Portland feed into 2 other teams, one of which is in my hometown and used to be called the Steamboats? Question mark. They've changed names like 4 times. It's irrelevant. And then they feed into the Chicago hockey team. So it's kind of funny to think about because it's like, my family moved from that area. My family members in the Portland area moved from my hometown's area, and like the hockey team goes in the opposite direction. It's funny. There's actually a incredible volume of people from my hometown who moved to Portland in particular. Like there's a whole like group of people who went to the same college I did, uh, who are in Portland, and like so much so that one of the safe ways in in a particular neighborhood where like a lot of graduates from that area live, stocks like frozen versions of chef's hat pizza, which like in the same way that Detroit kind of has like a micro style of pizza, my hometown has a micro style of pizza. The big marker is like a specific crust style that it is cut in strips and that the toppings are under the cheese. It's not that different from New York. It really isn't that different from New York. That's why I call it a micro style in the same way that it's technically a Detroit pie is the same basic idea as a New York slice. It's just executed a little differently. But it's wild to think about the number of people who likely like did the same thing that I'm like thinking about doing, in the sense of like, I really like Portland. I don't like it here. Bye. I've been going to Portland a bunch because I like it there. It's a good place. Like any large city, it's not without its foibles, but you know. Anyway, let's dive in to where we left off with Astounding Stories. Where did we leave off last week? D d d d d spaceship question mark? I don't remember. Hang on, let me scroll back. Oh, Moon Colony. Yeah, there's someone trying to do imperialism via the Moon Colony, and they're not actually on the Moon Colony because of radio reflections. And somebody picked this up early, and they were like, "You don't know what you're talking about, nerd radio man. Boom. We'll ignore you and go to the moon anyway." Uh, Basically, in a very small nutshell. Listen to last week's episode if you want to catch up. It should be just titled Astounding Stories August 1930, as is tradition with the first episode of every book. Anyway, let's continue, shall we? The gunners stood by the ray guns, 3 at each. Benson perched on a revolving stool above the batteries. He was watching a periscopic instrument that connected with the bridge dome by means of a tube, a flat mirror in front of him showing all points of the compass. At one edge, the shadow of the black ship was creeping slowly forward. 8,000 miles, sir. 1,000's our extreme range. Looks like she's making for our blind spot overhead. Nat stepped to the speaking tube. "Try to ram her," he called up to Brent. "We'll open with all guns pointing forward." "Very good, sir," the Cockney called back. You will have to excuse my Cockney accent. It's quite poor. But I'll be doing it as much as I can to try and differentiate these characters. The black shadow was now nearly in the center of the mirror. It moved upward and vanished. Suddenly, the atomic motors began wheezing again. The wheeze became a whine, and then a drone. "We've dropped to 2,000 miles an hour, sir." Nat leaped for the companion. As he reached the top, he could hear the teleradio apparatus in the wireless room overhead began to chatter. A. Don't try to interfere. I'm taking you to the crater of Pytho. Shall renew my offer there. Any resistance will be fatal. Axelson. Axelson, by the way, is the one who's trying to do space imperialism type vibe. And the wireless radio to identify himself as different from the main communications that come over the teleradio, he's going to start every one of his messages with A, A, A. Suddenly, the droning of the motors became a whine again, and then silence. Nat stared at the instrument board and uttered a cry. "What's the matter?" demanded Madge. Nat swung upon her. "The matter? He's neutralized our engines by some infernal means of his own, and he's towing us to the moon!" The huge sphere of the moon had long since covered the entire dome. The massive crater of Pytho now filled it, a black hollow 50 miles across, into which they were gradually settling. And as they settled, the pale earthlight, white as that of the moon on Earth, showed the gaunt masses of bare rock, on which nothing grew, in the long stalactites of glassy lava that hung from them. Then, out of the depths beneath, emerged the shadowy shape of the landing stage. "You are about to land," chattered the radio. "Don't try any tricks. They will be useless. Above all, don't try to use your puny ray. You are helpless." The ship was almost stationary. Little figures could be seen swarming upon the landing stage, ready to adjust the iron claws to clamp the hull. With a gesture of helplessness, Nat left the bridge and went down to the main deck, where, in obedience to his orders, the crew had all assembled. "Men, I'm putting it up to you. Axelson, the Black Caesar, advises us not to attempt to use the ray guns. I won't order you to. I'll leave the decision with you." "We tried it 15 minutes ago, sir," answered Benson. "I told Larrigan to fire off the stern starboard gun to see if it was in working order, and it wasn't." At that moment, the vessel settled with a slight jar onto the clamps. Once more, the teleradio began to scream. "Open the porthold and file out slowly. Resistance is useless. I shall turn my ray upon you and obliterate you instantly. Assemble on the landing stage and wait for me." "You'd best obey," Nat told his men. "We've got a passenger to consider." He glared at Madge as he spoke, and Madge's smile was a little more tremulous than it had been before. For context, if you missed last week, Madge is a stowaway who almost got sucked out into the vacuum of space, but managed to survive as they were venting, the atmosphere chamber by chamber. Don't ask me how, but they sure did. But that's why they vent the atmosphere chamber by chamber, is to, flush out stowaways. What do you think, Magnus? You had your little munch crunch? Or are you gonna sit in your little circle bed? Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
"This is the most thrilling experience of my life, Captain Lee, and I'll never rest until I've got an X-ray photograph of Mr. Axelson's skeleton for the Universal News Syndicate."
That's why she stowed away. She's a little news person, and she wants to get a picture of this guy's skeleton because apparently X-ray photos are all the rage. Very, very 1930s science fiction, I'll tell you that much. Could you imagine? Could you imagine just opening like the like celebrity pages? Like you open like Teen Beat magazine. I know Teen Beat hasn't been popular for like 30 years. Give me this. You open like Teen Beat magazine, and next to like a picture of some heartthrob with his hands in his hair and like the frosted tips. I'm gonna lean in because it's Teen Beat. He's got like one hand in his hair, and like through his fingers you can see his little frosted tips, and he's got like gleaming big smile, and he's like giving the camera a very like smolder look. And then like next to the normal picture of him, there's a picture of like his bones, and like young girls are like, "Oh, I can't believe Bimothy Jimothy's bone structure is so beautiful. Ooh," and like, in the same way, in the opposite direction, like young men are like opening like a supermodel magazine, and they're like, "Whoa, look at the bones on that one," and like they get, and like they rotate the magazine to camera, and it's like 50-50 It's like they've posed someone in what clearly would be a nude pose, uh, but in order to censor the nudity, they have like two bars of X-ray photograph over the bits, and they're like, "Whoa!" Sometimes I'm glad I think I'm funny because it makes streaming so much fun. I'm just picturing like some teenage boy like, "Ooh, what's under there? Look at how wide her pelvis is. Ooh, I know things." Or like, oh man, and what if like, let's pitch it farther to the future. Let's like look at it as in a cyberpunk way. Like, oh man, my bones are on display. I know what I'll do. I'll get lasers. I'll get laser tattoos carved in my bones, and like because it's cyberpunk they can like modulate the laser so it doesn't hurt the rest of your body, and so then you you have a little pocket x-ray beam and you're like, check this out, and then like your bone is visible and it's got like a little carving on it. You're like, yeah, is this cool? And like people are like, wow, that one must have been expensive, bone tattoos. Oh man, and if we're cyberpunk, right? They could modulate the if they can modulate the laser enough to not harm the rest of your skin, they could also modulate the laser precisely enough to like make uh what's the word I'm looking for? Like metamaterial type patterns that would then make the X-ray have color. Ooh, that's fun. Somebody write that down. That's actually not an awful like world building concept. Sure, being able to show off the bone tattoo might be a little infeasible, just because of how X-rays work. But like, if you're in a cyberpunk dystopia, you're not gonna care about experiencing a few extra like bananas worth of radiation. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe I'm full of it. Who knows? Do they have like because they've made metamaterials that like bend light around a thing, so like couldn't you also make a metamaterial that like makes a specific color occur? Because like birds, there are certain birds that aren't like pigmented blue, but like because of the structure of their feathers, that's why they're blue. So like you would think that like those two things you can meet in the middle and like make x-ray colors, if that makes sense. Like maybe it's too energetic, or like it'd be unhealthy for it to be that energetic, like bumping down all the way from X-rays to visible light. Or maybe it's like an AR thing. Uh maybe it's not literal X-rays, but it like projects an AR slice onto your body that everybody else's like, future techno goggles can see. But on that, like, but then like you could just have that be part of your body model digitally, and you wouldn't have to get it carved in your bones, which still would be cool. Like, could you imagine being able to like tattoo your body in 3 dimensions using augmented reality? That'd be so fun. Like, you can say, all right, so I got my top layer of tattoos, and like it like AR holograms over your body, but I also got this bottom layer of tattoos, and it just underneath it, and like you could do like really interesting like forced perspective tattoos with multiple layers, or like, anyway. Can you tell I really want to play a cyberpunk style tabletop RPG? I haven't done one yet, and I have a lot of fun weird ideas for world building. But anyway, the book we're reading, remember that? Before I wandered off topic for minutes at a time, yelling about a thing that's entirely unrelated? X-ray photograph, that's what got us here. One by one, at last, the crew filed down the ladder onto the landing stage, gasping and choking in the rarefied air that lay like a blanket at the bottom of the crater. And the reason for this was only too apparent to Nat as soon as he was on the level stage. Overhead, at an altitude of about a mile, the black ship hung, and from its bow a stupendous searchlight played to and fro over the bottom of the crater, making it light as day. And where there had been the mining machinery, the great buildings that had housed convicts and moon people, and the huge edifice that contained the pumping station, there was nothing at all. The devilish ray of Axelson had not merely destroyed them, it had obliterated all traces of them, and the crew of the liner were breathing the remnants of the atmosphere that still lay at the bottom of the crater of Pitho. Ah, that's a detail I forgot that we learned last week. The moon is being used as Space Australia, essentially. Anyway. But beside the twin landing stages constructed by the World Federation, another building arose with an open front, and that front was a huge mirror now scintillating under the searchlight from the black ship. That's it, sir. That's what? The deflecting mirror I was speaking of. Sorry, I'm laughing at my accent because it's real bad. I can't do Cockney. Can this guy just be generically British? That's what deflected the ray that wiped out China. The ray didn't come from the moon, and that's the mirror that deflects the teleradio waves, the super Hertzian rays that carry the sound. I say, then proceeding to not do any actually approximation of a British accent. This guy just has an accent. I'll pick one. Nat did not answer, sick at the heart of at the failure of his mission. He was watching the swarm of moon men who were at work upon the landing stage, turning the steel clamps and regulating the mechanism that controlled the apparatus. Dwarfed, apish creatures with tiny limbs and chests that stood out like barrels, they bustled about, chattering in shrill voices that seemed like the piping of birds. It was evident that Axelson, though he'd wiped out the moon convicts and the moon people in the crater, had reserved a number of the latter for his own personal use. The black ship was dropping into its position at the second landing stage, connected with the first by a short bridge. The starboard hold swung open, and a file of shrouded and hooded forms appeared, masked men breathing in condensed air from receptacles on their chests, and staring with goggle eyes at their captives. Each one held in his hand a lethal tube containing the ray, and as if by command they took up their stations about their prisoners. Then, at a signal from their leader, they suddenly doffed their masks. Nat looked at them in astonishment. He had not known whether these would be Earth denizens or inhabitants of some other planet, but they were Earthmen, and they were old. Men of 60 or 70 years, with long gray beards and wrinkled faces, eyes that stared out from beneath penthouses of shaggy eyebrows, faces on which were imprinted despair and hopelessness. Then the first man took off his mask, and Nat saw a man of a different character. A man in the prime of his life, with a mass of jet-black hair and a black beard that swept to his waist, a nose like a hawk's, and a pair of dark blue eyes that fixed themselves on Nat's with a look of Luciferian pride. "Hello, Nathaniel Lee. Welcome," said the man in deep tones that had a curious accent which Nat could not place. "I ought to know your name, since your teleradios on Earth have been shouting it for 3 days past, as that of the man who is to save the Earth from the threat of destruction. And now you know me." "Axelson, the Black Caesar," Nat muttered. For the moment, he was taken aback. He had anticipated any sort of person except this man who stood, looked, and spoke like a Viking, this incarnation of pride and strength. Axelson smiled, then his eyes lit upon Madge Dawes, and for a moment he stood as if petrified with a block of massive granite. Who is this?"
Why, I'm Madge Dawes of the Universal News Syndicate," answered the girl, smiling at Axelson in her irrepressible manner. "And I'm sure you're not nearly such a bold, bad pirate as people think. You're gonna let us all go free."
Instantly, Axelson seemed to become transformed into a maniac. He turned to the old man and shouted in some incomprehensible language. Nat and Madge, Brent and Benson, and 2 others who wore the uniforms of officers were seized and dragged across the bridge to the landing stage, where the black ship was moored. The rest of the crew were ordered into a double line, and then the slaughter began. Before Nat could even struggle to break away from the gibbering moon men to whom he and the other prisoners had been consigned, the aged crew of the Black Caesar had begun their work of almost instantaneous destruction. Streams of red and purple light shot from the ray pistols that they carried, and before them, the crew of the ether liner simply withered up and vanished. They became mere masses of human debris piled on the landing stage. And upon these masses, too, the old men turned their implements, until only a few heaps of charred carbon remained on the landing stage, impalpable as burned paper, and slowly rising in the low atmospheric pressure, until they drifted over the crater. Nat had cried out in horror at the sight, and tried to tear himself free from the grasp of the moon dwarves who held him. So had the rest. Never was struggle so futile. Despite their short arms and legs, the moon dwarves held them in an unshakable grip, chattering and squealing as they compressed them against their barrel-like chests, until the breath was all but crushed out of their bodies. "You devil!" cried Nat furiously as Axelson came up to him. Axelon actually probably would have been a better villain name than Axelson. Axelon, although to be fair, Axelon sounds a little like a little fantasy. It sounds like a name you'd give a wizard. You know what I mean? Axelon the Mighty. Oh, I've thought of a really funny joke to post in a Discord later, but I digress. "Why don't you kill us too?" And he hurled furious taunts and abuse at him, in the hopes of goading him into making the same comparatively merciless end of his prisoners. Axelson looked at him calmly, but made no reply. He looked at Madge again, and his features were convulsed with some emotion that gave him the aspect of a fiend. And then only did Nat realize it was Madge who was responsible for the Black Caesar's madness. Axelson spoke again, and the prisoners were hustled up the ladder and on board the black vessel. Sorry. Again, I have made myself laugh with my stupid joke in the back of my brain. Let's keep reading. What's up with this guy? Why you do this? The Commandant Commissar will see. The Commandant Commissar will see you. The door of their prison had opened, letting in a shaft of light and disclosing one of the graybeards who stood there, pointing at Nat. The who? The Commandant Commissar, Comrade Axelson, snarled the graybeard. Nat knew what the strange jargon meant. He'd read books about the political sect known as Socialist, who flourished in the 19th and 20th centuries, and indeed were even yet not everywhere extinct. And with that, a flash of intuition explained the presence of these old men on board. These were the men who had been imprisoned in their youth with Axelson's father. They'd escaped and made their way into space. They'd been supposed dead long since. But somewhere they must have survived. And here they were, speaking a jargon of past generations, and ignorant that the world had changed, relics of the past, dead as the dead moon from which the black ship was winging away through the ether.
"Don't go, Captain! Tell him we'll all go together," pleaded Madge.
Nat shook his head.
Maybe I'll be able to make terms with him,"
he answered, and stepped out upon the vessel's deck. The graybeard slammed the door and laughed savagely.
"You'll make no terms with the Black Caesar. This is the reign of the proletariat. The bourgeoisie must die. So Lenin decree."
We have already pulled the disclaimer on this book, but I will once again remind you by disclaiming that these books are old. This came out in 1930. Please be polite about how you feel about this book. I am going to do my best to do so as well. That said, this is very funny to look back at in hindsight. Space. Fully automated luxury space communism is probably what they're after. Oh, I've made a very stupid niche joke. Anyway. But he stopped suddenly and passed his hand over his forehead like a man awakening from a dream. Oh, no, I gotta sneeze. Altier, why did you bring your sneezes in here? No! Oh gosh. Come on. I need to sneeze. This will bother me for the next, 3 hours. That will have to do. I'm shocked you don't have, some kind of sneeze emote, by the way, Altier. It's a consistent issue. That was a cough, but I coughed in such a way to satisfy the nerves in my nose. Oh no. I touched my nose to illustrate and then they activated again. Ugh. Hang on a second, I need to mute the mic. Buttons. Okay. I was so proud of myself. I was like, haha, I have coughed to delete the sneeze. And then the sneeze was like, I am not deleted. Get dunked on. Anyway.
Surely the proletariat has already triumphed on Earth. A long time has passed, and daily we expect the summons to return and establish the New World Order. What year is this? Is it not 2017? It's so hard to reckon on Eros.
On Eros?
Thought Nat.
This is the year 2044, he answered. You've been dreaming, my friend. We've had our New World Order, and it's not in the least like the one that you and your friends anticipated.
God, screamed the old man. God, you're lying to me, bourgeoisie. You're lying, I tell you.
So Eros was their destination. Eros, one of the asteroids, those tiny fragments of a broken planet lying outside the orbit of Mars. Some of these little worlds, of which more than 1,000 are known to exist, are no longer than a gentleman's country estate. Some are mere rocks in space. Eros, Nat knew, was distinguished among them from the fact that it had an eccentric orbit, which brought it at times nearer Earth than any other heavenly body, except the moon. Excuse me, library, what are you doing? Are we behaving? Nobody ever loved Library Cat enough. Everybody welcome frequent co-host of the show, Library Cat.
also known as Fat Library Cat. He's around often enough that he gets his own little emote of flopping down all comfy.
Which, fun fact, did you know? You can use through the power of $5 whole, or alternatively, a free sub that you acquire by linking your Amazon account to your Twitch account. You, too, can subscribe and gain such wonderful benefits as these lovely emotes. Excuse me, library, I need to type something. You can get a library emote, or he's a little guy. Or, if library is not your viewer, you can also get a Magnus emote. He's got a little bread loaf. It him. He does it. Alternate is correct. Let's see here. Oh, this is the other tier 1 emote. It's me doing a stupid still, and it makes me laugh. If you're feeling particularly fancy, there are larger grades of subscriptions that will get you such wonderful emotes as it's a little cat that is having a really rough time. I know exactly where I found this, and it was like a lunchroom graphic, and I know they meant the cat to look excited, but he's just like, he just looks so agonized. Whose scared emote is that? Is that Boncho's scared emote? That's fantastic. Last but not least, which is probably why Altier is being scared, is the Beholder. If you want to pay, like, I think it's like $25 or something like that to subscribe, you get the Beholder emote, which is a terror of flesh and eyeballs that I have edited together out of my own face. Once again, that's this emote, the Beholder. I think I call it Monster under the hood because, technically Beholder is copywritten. But everybody loves the thumbnail monster. He's just a little guy. Nobody hates the thumbnail monster, not at all. Definitely no one in the audience is horrified by the existence of the thumbnail monster. And if you'd really like to not have the thumbnail monster as our level 3 emote, you could technically donate me money. I believe that's up and running. I think I have a donation link. You could technically donate me money. I don't have a chat command for it, but it's underneath the video on web. It's a Stream Elements donation link. I'm shocked I don't have a donation command. Let me fix that real quick, actually, while I'm thinking about it, because that seems silly to not have. Let's see here. Let me just open my own stream real quick to open my panels and click on the donation link, because I am the silly. Source, trust me, bro. Yeah, there's a donation link. It's right here. Let me just make this a command real quick. Don't worry about it. Command add donation. You can send me money for the low price of the amount of money you send me. Yeah, definitely donation. There we go. For those of us on mobile who don't see the about part of the page, even you, the mobile listener, can send me money. The podcast hosting costs me $40 a month. Someday I'll be able to pay for that with your donations. And, in theory, if you sent me the correct volume of money, I could commission something for that level 3 emoticon slot. so you don't have to suffer through having the thumbnail monster inhabit your chat. I love the thumbnail monster because it makes me laugh. That is my goal. Every time I am like making a thumbnail, like a bespoke thumbnail for something, I'm like, how can I make myself laugh with the concept of this video? And the thumbnail monster comes from a D&D adjacent video game I played. And I love thumbnail monster. It makes me laugh every time. If I ever run a beholder in a tabletop campaign that's done digitally, I'm probably gonna put the thumbnail monster down as its token because it makes me laugh. But I digress. Donation is not the only thing you can do to support the podcast. You can also go check out the podcast itself. Thanks to the whim of many, many Rock's little thoughts. The more you listen to the podcast, the more people will be recommended it, and the more people will have a chance to like it. It's true. So go check it out. It's Paper Cuts. It's the one with the blue thumbnail, instead of the one talking about hockey for some reason. I don't know why they named their hockey-based podcast Paper Cuts. It seems very silly to me. There was also one talking about art zines. That one is also not me. The art zine one was actually quite satisfying to listen to. But if you're here, you'd much prefer books read aloud. I heartily suggest it. Anyway, now that I've gotten thoroughly distracted by the concept of self-promotion, let's keep reading. This, yeah, these luxury space communists were living on the asteroid Eros. That's where we were. Also that it had only been known for 30 years. It was supposed to be a double planet having a dark companion. That was in Nat's mind as he ascended the bridge to where Axelson was standing at the controls with one of the Greybeards beside him. The door of his stateroom was open, and suddenly there scuttled out of it one of the most bestial objects Nat had ever seen. It was a moon woman, a dwarfish figure clothed in a shapeless garment of spun cellulose, and in her arms she held a heavy-headed moon baby whose huge chest stood up like a pyramid, while the tiny arms and legs hung dangling down. "Here is the bourgeoisie, commandant," said Nat's captor. Axelson looked at Nat, eye meeting eye in a slow stare. Then he relinquished the controls to the Greybeard beside him and motioned Nat to precede him into the stateroom. Nat entered. It was an ordinary room, much like that of the captain of the ether liner now stranded on the moon. There were a bunk, chairs, a desk, and a radio receiver. Axelson shut the door. He tried to speak and failed to master his emotion. At last he said, "I am prepared to offer you terms, Nathaniel Lee, in accordance with my promise." "I'll make no terms with murderers," replied Nat bitterly. Axelson stood, looking at him. His great chest rose and fell. Suddenly he put out one great hand and clapped Nat on the shoulder. "Wise men recognize facts. Within 3 weeks I shall be the undisputed ruler of Earth, whether of a desert or of a cowed and submissive subject population. Rest with yours, men. I have never been on Earth, for I was born on Eros. My mother died at my birth. I have never seen another human woman until today." Nat looked at him, trying to follow what was in Axelson's mind. "My father fled to Eros, a little planet 17 miles in diameter, as we have found." "Library, don't eat that." "Well, don't look at me that way. Don't look at me and act like you need to eat the bolt that was on the floor. That's far too much metal for your little diet. You want some iron supplements, I'll give you, like, some cereal or something. Don't eat the bolt." "I know, I'm so mean, so rude to you. Don't let you eat the bolt. Don't let you pick at the window screens. Don't let you, release the bogus from the mattress. Don't even let you eat too fast and puke. So mean, so rude." Sorry, I like to give my cats guff sometimes because they are little and small, and sometimes they need it. What are you sniffing at now? Man, I've been trying to read. What are you doing? Sniff, sniff, sniff. What have we found? Oh, a pile of fuzz. Yeah, I wouldn't eat the pile of fuzz either. I understand you want to get the pile of fuzz because it's cat hair. And you're like, oh no, that can't be on the floor. But if you eat that, you know what's going to happen is you're going to get a hairball. And I'm going to wake up at like 4 in the morning. Do I don't want to do that. It's true, alternate. So many rules I impose upon the kitty babies. I'm just such a rude dictator. Aren't I? He's giving me a side eye right now. He's like, don't patronize me in front of the internet. They can hear you. It's like, too bad. You were the one who decided to be a gerblin in the middle of a podcast. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Oh no, not Coco. Coco he likes to try eating the hair on the cat brush. Coco, baby, sweet gremlin. The hair is on the cat brush so you don't eat it, so you don't yak up hairball. That's what it's for. Hello, Murray. He's like, don't go talking to other cats. They can hear him? I think that's the point. It's true! It is the point that you all can hear me. Yeah, nobody never loved baby. Alright, let's keep reading. Hopefully library gets comfy. We'll see. Anyway, our very French communist, who is French because I picked the wrong accent. Ironically, Darcy's the only hairball culprit. Ooh, fair enough. Yeah, Library is usually the hairball haver because he will groom Magnus while he's sleeping. They both do it to each other while they're sleeping, to be fair, but Library has much more opportunity to groom Magnus while he's sleeping, and so he takes on a lot of hair because Magnus won't let me brush him. But I digress. Our French luxury space communist. My father, he did things. Yes, my father fled to Eros, a little planet 17 miles in diameter, as we have found. He called it a heavenly paradise. It was his intention to found there a colony of those who were in rebellion against the tyrants of Earth. His followers journeyed to the moon and brought back moon women for wives, but there were no children of these unions. Later there were dissensions and civil war. 3/4 of the colony died in battle with one another. I was a young man. I seized the rounds of power. Those survivors, these old men, were disillusioned and deceived. I made myself absolute. I brought moon men and women to Eros to serve us as slaves. But in a few years, the last of my father's old compatriots will have died, and thus it was that I conceived of conquering the earth and having men to obey me. For 15 years I have been experimenting and constructing apparatus with which I now have the earth at my mercy. But I shall need assistance, intelligent men who will obey me and aid me in my plans. That is why I saved you and the other officers of your easier lands. If you join me, you shall have the highest post on the earth under me, Nathaniel Lee, and those others, shall be under you. Axelson, who has the most obnoxious voice I have probably ever done on this podcast, at which I will remind you, the text is on screen if you're watching this in video, and a link to the text is in the episode description if you are watching it by audio. Please follow along for my nonsense accent. Axelson paused, and loathing the man though he did, Ned was conscious of a feeling of pity for him that he could not control. He saw his lonely life on Eros, surrounded by those phantom humans of his past, and he understood his longing for Earth rule. He, the planetary exile, the sole human being on all the planetary systems outside Earth, except perhaps his dwindling company of aged men.
Today, Nasanji Ali, my life was recast in a new mold when I saw the woman which you have brought with you. I did not know before that woman was so beautiful to look upon. I did not dream such creatures such as she existed. She must be mine, Nathaniel Lee. But that is immaterial. What is your answer to my offer?
Nat was trying to think through passion, though his passions distorted the mental images as they arose in his brain. To Axelson, it was evidently incomprehensible that there would be any objection to his taking of Madge. Nat saw that he must temporize for Madge's sake.
I'll have to consult my companions.
Of course, that is reasonable. Tell them that unless they agree to join me, it will be necessary for them to die. Do it, men minds, le more. We hate it on Eros, and the moon men must hate it too, though they have a queer legend that something in the shape of an invisible man rises from their ashes. My father told me that superstition exists on Earth too, in his time at the very least. Go and talk to your companion, Nathaniel Lee.
I'm having a little too much fun with this accent.
The Black Caesar's voice was almost friendly. He clapped Nat on the shoulder again and called the Greybeard to conduct him back to his prison.
Oh, Captain Lee, I'm so glad you're back,
exclaimed Madge.
We've been afraid for you. Is he such a terrible man, this Black Caesar?
Nat sneered and then grinned malevolently.
Well, he's not exactly the old-fashioned idea of a Sunday school teacher.
Of course, he couldn't tell the girl about Axelson's proposal. The little group of prisoners stood on the upper deck of the black ship and watched the moon men scurrying about the landing stage as she hovered to her position. Axelson's father had not erred when he called the tiny planet Eros a heavenly paradise, for no other term could have described it. They were in an atmosphere so similar to that of Earth they could breathe with complete freedom, but there seemed to be a lightness and vigor in their limbs that indicated the air was supercharged with oxygen or perhaps ozone. The presence of this, in large amounts, was indicated by the intense blueness of the sky, across which fleecy clouds were drifting. And in that sky, what looked like 80 moons were circling with extraordinary swiftness. From 30 to 40 full moons of all sizes, from that of a sun to that of a brilliant planet, and riding black against the blue. The sun, hardly smaller than when seen from Earth, shone in the zenith, and Earth and Mars hung in the east and north, respectively, each like a blood-red sun. The moons were some of the 1,000 other asteroids, weaving their lacy patterns in and out among each other. But stupendous as the sight was, it was toward the terrestrial scene that the party turned their eyes as the black ship settled. A sea of sapphire blue lapped sands of silver and broke into soft lines of foam. To the water's edge extended a lawn of brightest green, and behind this an arm of the sea extended into what looked like a tropical forest. Most of the trees were palm-like, but towered to immense heights, their foliage swaying in a gentle breeze. There were apparently no elevations, and yet so small was the little sphere that the ascending curve gave the illusion of distant heights, while the horizon, instead of seeming to rise, instead lay perfectly flat, producing an extraordinary feeling of insecurity. Near the water's edge, a palatial mansion, built of hewn logs and of a single story, stood in a garden of brilliant flowers. Nearer, beyond the high landing stage, were the great shipbuilding works, and near them an immense and slightly concave mirror that flashed back the light of the sun. "The death ray," whispered Brant to Nat. Axelson came up to the party as the ship settled down. "Welcome to Eros. My father told me in some Earth tongues that name meant love." Never, perhaps, was so strange a feast held as that with which Axelson entertained his guests that day. Dwarvish moon men passed viands and some sort of palm wine in the banquet room, which singularly resembled one of those early 20th century interiors shown in museums. Only the presence of a dozen of the aged guards, armed with ray rods, lent the grimness to the scene. Madge sat on Axelson's right, and Nat sat on his left. The girl's lightheartedness had left her. Her face grew strained as Axelson's motives, which Nat had not dared disclose to her, disclosed themselves in this manner. Once, when he laid his finger for a moment against her white throat, she started, and for a moment it seemed as if the gathering storm must break. For Nat had talked with his men, and all had agreed that he would not turn traitor, though they intended to temporize as long as possible in hope of catching the Black Caesar unawares. Then slowly a somber twilight began to fall, and Axelson rose. "Let us walk in the gardens during the reign of Erebos."
Erebos?
"The black world which overshadows us each sleeping period." Next, Nat knew what he meant. The dark companion of Eros revolves around it every 6 hours. The day of Eros would therefore never be longer than 6 hours, this without reckoning the revolution of Eros around the sun. But, owing to its small size, it was probable that it was bathed in almost perpetual sunshine. The sweet scent of the flowers, much stronger than any flower on earth, filled the air. They walked across the green lawn and entered a jungle path with bamboos and creeping plants on either side and huge palm-like trees. Behind them stalked the guards with their ray rods. A lake of deepest black disclosed itself. Suddenly Madge uttered a scream and clung to Nat. "Look! Look! It's horrible!" Suddenly Nat realized that the lake swarmed with monsters. They were of crocodilian form, but twice the size of the largest crocodile, and sprawled over one another in the shallows beside the margin. As the party drew near, an enormous monster began waddling on its clawed feet toward them. Excuse me, water. A mouth half the length of the creature opened, disclosing a purplish tongue and hideous fangs. Madge screamed again. "Oh, so fear exists on Earth too. That makes my conquest sure. I suspected it, and yet I was not sure the science had not conquered it. But there is no cause for fear. A magnetic field protects us, see?" For the waddling monster suddenly stopped short, as if brought up sharply by the bars of a cage, and drew back. Axelson turned and wheezed in the moon language, if the gibbering of the dwarves could be called speech, and one of the guards answered him. "These primitive dwellers on Eros I have preserved as a means of discipline. The moon animals are afraid of them. I keep a supply of those who have transgressed my laws to feed them. See?" He turned and pointed. 2 guards were bringing a gibbering, screeching, struggling moon man with him. Despite his strength, he seemed incapable of making any resistance, but his whole body quivered. His hideous face was contorted with an agony of terror. At a distance of some 50 feet, they turned aside into a little bypath through the jungle, and appearing close beside the lake upon a raised platform. And what happened next happened so swiftly that Nat was unable to do anything to prevent it. The guards disappeared. The moon man, as if propelled by some invisible force, moved forward jerkily to the lake's edge. Instantly, one of the saurians had seized him in his jaws, and another had wrenched half the body away. The whole fighting, squirming mass had vanished in the depths. And from far away came the screeching chant of the moon men, as if in invocation to some hideous deity. And moving perceptibly, the huge black orb of Eros' dark satellite crept through the sky, completely covering it. Axelson stepped forward to where Nat stood, supporting Madge in his arms. The girl had fainted at her horror at the scene. "Your answer, Nathaniel Lee. I know you have been postponing the decision. Now I will take this girl, and you shall give me your answer. Will you and your men join me, or will you die as the moon men indeed died?" He spoke wheezily, as if he, like Nat, had a cold, and he put his arm around Madge. Next moment, something happened to him that had never happened in his life before. The Black Caesar went down under a well-directed blow to the jaw. He leaped to his feet, trembling with fury, and barked a command. Instantly, the old guards hurled themselves forward, and behind them, a horde of moon men came, ambling over the ground. While the guards covered their prisoners with their ray rods, 2 moon men seized each of them, imprisoning him in their unbreakable grasp. Axelson pointed upward. When the realm of Erebos is past, you become food for the denizens of the lake, unless you have agreed to save me. And he raised Madge in his arms, laughing as the girl fought and struggled to resist him.
Madge!
Cried Nat, trying to run toward her. So furious were his struggles that for a moment he succeeded in throwing off the Moonmen's grasp. Then he was caught again, and fighting desperately was borne off by the dwarves through the shadows. They traversed the border of the lake until a small stone building disclosed itself. Nat and the others were thrust inside into pitch darkness. The door clanged. It was in vain they hurled themselves against it. It was of wood, but it was as solid as the stone itself. It didn't give an inch for all their struggles. Where is your commandant? The whisper seemed in the stone hut itself. Jonathan, speak to him. I am the god who brought him to the Black Caesar on board the ship.
I am here. Where are you?
I'm in the House of the Ray. I'm on my guard there. I'm speaking to the telephone, which runs only to where you are. You can speak anywhere in the hut, and I shall hear you.
Well, what do you want?
You love the other woman. I remember when I was a boy. We used to love. I'd forgotten there was a girl in Stanford, you see. Tell me, is this true that the year 2044 is what it is? The proletariat has not yet triumphed?
It's true. Those dreams are finished. We're proud of the World Federation. Tell me about Madge Dawes, the Earth Woman. Is she safe?
He's taken her to his house. I do not think she's harmed. He's ill. He's closely guarded. There are rumors afoot. I do not know.
What do you want, then?
If the Black Caesar dies, will you take me to Earth again? I long so for the old Earth life. I'll be your slave if only I can set foot on Earth before I die.
Can you rescue us?
The woodmen are on guard.
They have no ray guns, and you have.
The penalty would be terrible. I should be thrown to the monsters.
Can you each get us a ray gun? Will you risk it to get back to Earth?
A pause.
My friend, I am coming.
Nat heard Benson hissing in his ear.
We can surprise them. We can get possession of the black ship and return. We must get Madge Dawes and smash the mirror.
After that, there was nothing to do but wait. The door clicked open. An indistinct form stood in the entrance. It was already growing light. The dark satellite that eclipsed Eros was passing.
Hush, I have brought you ray rods.
It was the old man with whom Nat had spoken on the boat. Under his arm he held 5 metallic rods, tipped with luminous glass. He handed one to each of the prisoners.
Do you know how to use them?
Nat examined his.
It's an old style rod that was used on Earth 50 years ago. I've seen them in museums. It came into use in the Second World War of 1950 or thereabouts. You slip back the safety catch and press the button, taking aim as one did with the pistol. You fellows have seen pistols.
My father had an old one, said the chief mate Barnes.
How many times can they be fired without reloading?
Asked the old guard.
10 times, sometimes more. They were all freshly loaded yesterday.
Take us to where Axelson is.
First, you must destroy the guards. I sent the one on duty here away on some pretext, but the others may be here at any moment. Talk lower, are you going to kill them?
We must.
The old fellow began to sob.
We were companions together. They seized us, imprisoned us together, the capitalists, years ago. I thought the proletariat would have won. You say it is all different. I'm an old man. Life is sad and strange.
Listen, is Axelson in the house?
He is in his secret room. I do not know the way. None of us have even entered it.
And Madge?
She was with him. I do not know anything more.
He sank down, groaning and broken. Nat pushed his way past him. It was fast growing light now. A ray of sunshine shot from beneath the edge of the dark sphere overhead, which still filled almost all the heavens. At that moment, the hideous face and squat body of one of the moon men came into view at the end of the path. The creature stopped, gibbering with surprise, and then rushed forward, mewling like a cat. Nat aimed his ray rod and pressed the button. The streak of light, not quite aimed in Nat's excitement, sheared off one side of the Moon Man's face. The creature rocked where it stood, raised its voice in a screech, and rushed forward again, arms flailing. And this time Nat got home. The streak passed right through the body of the monster, which collapsed into a heap of calcified carbon. But its screech had brought the other dwarves running to the scene. In a moment, the path was blocked by a score of the hideous monsters, which, taking in what was happening, came forward in a yelling bunch. The ray rods streaked their message of death into the thick of them, yet so fierce was the rush that some parts got home. Arms, legs, barrel chests, halves of men, covering the five with a more impalpable black powder into which their bodies were dissolving. Nat remembered afterward the horror of a grinning face apparently loose in the air and a flailing arm that lashed his chest. For 15 seconds, perhaps, it was like struggling with a vampire creature in a hideous dream. And then, just when it seemed to Nat that he was going mad, he found the path free, and the huddled remains of the Moon Man piled up about him on every side. He emptied 2 more ray shots into the writhing mass, and saw it cease to quiver and then dissolve into the black powder. He turned and looked at his companions. They too showed the horror of the strain they'd just undergone.
We must kill the guards now, and then find Madge and save her.
We are with you, answered Brent, and together the five rushed into the sunlight and into the open. There were no guards on duty at the entrance of the house, and the doors stood wide open. Nat rushed through the door at the head of his men. A single guard was in the hall, but he only looked up as they came in. It was evident that he was in no condition to resist, for he was in the grip of some terrible disease. His features were swollen so they were hardly recognizable, and hoarse, panting breaths came from his lungs. He was so far gone he hardly registered surprise at the advent of the five.
Where's Axelson?
The guard pointed toward the end of the corridor, then let his arm fall. Nat led his men along the half-dark passage. At the end of the corridor, 2 more guards were on duty, but one was collapsed upon the floor, apparently unconscious, and the other, making a feeble attempt to draw his ray rod, crumbled into ashes as Brent fired. The 5 burst through the door. They found themselves in the banquet hall. The remnants of the meal were still upon the table, and 3 moon men, looking as if they'd been poisoned, were writhing on the floor. At the farther end of the hall was another door. This gave upon a central hall, with a door in each of its 4 sides and a blaze of sunlight coming through the crystal roof. The 5 stopped, baffled. Then, all of a sudden, Axelson's voice broke the silence. His voice, yet changed almost beyond recognition, hoarse, broken, and gasping. Try the doors, nearly. Try its door and then go back. And you know that in an instant I can bless you to nothingness where you stand. And suddenly, there came Madge's voice. He can't, Nat, he's dying, he knows it. I won't let him, and he hasn't got the strength to move.
Which door?
None of the doors, they're a trick. Go forward and press the grooved panel upon the wall in front of you.
Nat stepped forward, found the panel, and pressed it. The wall swung open like 2 folded doors, revealing another room within that was perfectly circular. It contained a quantity of pieces of apparatus, some glowing with light, some dark, and a radio-transmitting set. It was evidently the secret lair of the Black Caesar, and there he was, trapped at last by the mortal illness that had overtaken him. He was lying upon the couch, his great form stretched out, his features hideously swollen by the same disease that had attacked the guards. Nat raised his ray rod, but Axelson feebly put up his hand, and Nat lowered the weapon. And as the 5 gathered about the dying man, again Nat felt that strange sense of pathos and pity for him. He'd never known Earth life. He was not to be measured by the common standards applicable on Earth, after all. Don't fire, Nat, said Madge in a shaky voice. She was seated beside Axelson, and the wonder of it, she was sponging the foam from his lips, moistening his forehead even. She raised the crystal that contained some fluid to his lips, and he drained it greedily. So, it wins, Nathaniel. I am dying, I know it. It is the same dreaded disease that came to the moon at the time of my father's landing there. 3/4 of the moon's animals died. It is mortal. His lungs, they burn away.
My father told me that on Earth it is not mortal. He called it the cold, but I am burning hot.
Then only did Nat understand, and the irony of it made him catch his breath and grit his teeth to check his hysterical laughter. The Black Caesar, the terror of Earth, was dying of a common cold which he himself had given him. The coryza germ, almost harmless on Earth among a population habituated to it for countless generations, had assumed the potency of a plague here, where no colds had ever been known, at least among the moon men, and even among the guards after their lifetime in the germless climate of Eros.
"I failed, Nathaniel,"
came the Black Caesar's voice.
"and yet that hardly troubles me. There is something more I do not understand. She is a creature like ourselves, with will and reason. She is not like the moon women. She told me that she did not wish to be the queen of the earth because she did not love me. I do not understand. And so I am glad to go."
A gasp came from Axelson's throat as he raised his head and tried to speak, but the death rattle was already clutching his throat. A slight struggle, and the massive form upon the couch was nothing but inanimate clay once more. Madge rose from beside him, and the tears were streaming down her face.
"He wasn't a bad man, Nat. He was gentle with me. He didn't understand, that was all. When I refused to be his queen, he was overcome with bewilderment. Oh, Nat, I can never write the story for the Universal News Syndicate."
Nat led her sobbing from the room. Soon he succeeded in getting the tele-radio communication with Earth. He broadcast the news that the Black Caesar was dead, that his power for evil was at an end forever. Then, in the few hours of daylight that remained, he set his men to work to smash the ray outfit that destroyed China. There was some principle involved which he did not altogether understand, though Brent professed to have a clue to it, but it was evident that except for the ray, Axelson had possessed no knowledge superior to that of the Earth scientists. Of the guards, a few were already recovering, principally those of comparatively younger age. Not a moon man, on the other hand, had survived the epidemic. As soon as Nat had got the guards out of the house, he reduced it to ashes by the aid of an old-fashioned box of phosphoric matches. As the satellite was creeping once more over Eros, the black ship set sail. But of the return journey to the moon, where they transferred to their own ship, of their landing at New York, and of the triumphal reception that was accorded them, well, this is no place to speak of it. Nat's journey with Madge from the center of the city, in what was the old borough of Westchester, to his home in the suburb of Hartford, was a continual ovation. Crowds lined the air route, and every few miles, so thick was the air traffic, he was forced to hover and address the cheering multitudes. Hartford itself was en fete, and across the main road, the city bosses had hung an old-fashioned banner, strung from house to house on either side, bearing the legend,
"For World President Nathaniel Lee."
Nat turned to Madge, who was seated behind him silently.
Ever hear of getting married?
"Of course I've heard of it. You think I'm as dumb as that, Nat Lee? Why, those old-fashioned novels are part of the school's curriculum, the public ones even."
Pity those days can't come back. You ought to be a world presidentess, you know.
I was thinking if we register as companions, I could take you to the White House. You'd have a swell time there taking x-rays on visiting days.
"Well, I never thought of that. Might be worth trying out."
Ah, the city of the frogmen as we enter the story of the second satellite by Edmund Hamilton.
Actually, you know what? I think, yeah, programming decision on the fly. Rather than starting, the second satellite by Edmund Hamilton, I need to take a little break, and so we are going to be right back, actually, I think. And so now is the perfect time for you to, get up, stretch, If you've been sitting with me, maybe walk a little bit. If you've been standing, maybe take a seat if you can. Definitely drink some water. Water, vitally important. Definitely pet your pets for me. Also a vitally important step. If you have medication that you normally take around this time, I would heartily suggest that you do so. This is your reminder. If you have a medication you only need to take once a day and you haven't gotten to it yet, this is your reminder. Take care of business and everything. We'll be back in at most 15 minutes with the short story of choice here that the magazine has lended us, The Second Satellite by Edmund Hamilton. We will be right back. Be good, everyone. You know what? I don't need to be up and about long enough that I think we need music. But I will be right back relatively quickly. I just have to, take a little bio break, make sure I've got enough water, stretch a little. It'll be relatively quick. Stick around. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say definitively that I have defeated the issue I typed about in chat. You know, the one that starts with H and ends with hiccups. But I will say they've stopped for a little bit. So, while we're here, right as we're getting back from the BRB here, I need to call out what that logo above my head means. That's the Codex. Now, normally, the Codex is a group of reading streamers who get together once a month for a book club. But Jeffrey, the guy who, kind of makes executive decisions for the group, it's roughly democratic. He like pitches an idea and we all kind of argue about it. And he's like, "Cool, all right, this idea I pitched, it's great." And he kind of makes administrative decisions along with two other people. One of which is Gariki, our lovely moderator around here. Yeah, neighbor. Yes, it's true. Um, but yeah, we usually have monthly book clubs. They're on hold for a while. I would love to see the monthly book clubs come back, especially now that I'm likely to have Saturdays available to show up for them. I'm driving a lot less in the near future. They tended to schedule book clubs when I was gonna drive, and I was really miffed about it because I missed one, and then I kept missing them. It was a whole thing. I also really think that the Codex could really benefit from having smaller group projects. It's technically my Twitch team. If you're on desktop, you can click below me, and it's a whole list of people. But there's also a Discord. Excuse me, library, may I type? He's like, no, you may not. Thank you. You've been taping all day. But it's a Discord. It's fellow reading streamers like myself. We cover pretty broad swath of genre, so to speak. I tend to lean vintage old sci-fi. Gariki does Japanese fairy tales. Jevons, who is from the New Zealand, who I think prefers to be called Jev, but I keep forgetting that, has been doing a wide swath of things. I think they're in the middle of an Austen novel right now. They were previously doing the Hardy Boys because they have access to that. Before that, they were doing a little Sherlock. Like, if you like the concept of what I do, but you don't always love the things I'm reading, the Codex will have someone for you, short version. There's even a VTuber. Maybe even two. I know Jubilee OB has like a little VTuber model when she is not feeling camera ready, which is relatable. I have some ideas on the back burner, and I will say no more because I think I have actually a very clever idea. I don't watch a ton of VTubers, but I don't think anybody's done this yet. Granted, it is a PNG, so like that's a pretty broad net to cast, but I don't think anyone's done exactly what I'm planning yet. People have done similar concepts, but not exactly what I'm planning on. We'll see if it comes together. But I digress. Codex is pretty great, honestly, especially when we're having book clubs. We get to like actually have like, English class in-depth discussions about the books we're reading. One of the few that I actually managed to show up to, thanks to lack of schedule fuss, was Flowers for Algernon, which was a really fascinating one because Flowers for Algernon's been adapted from a short story into a novel and then into a book and then into a movie, even. And so, like, there were certain people like myself who only had time for the short story. I know, library, I'm so mean to you, steal your little eye gunks. I only had time for the short story, so that's all I read. It didn't get out of being in a hold on the library until after the stream, so I didn't get to it, but I got to the short story, and so like discussing the differences between the short story and the book, and then the book and the movie was really fascinating, and like they do that level of like depth, talking about like the themes of the book. Why did they choose to do X? Why did they choose to do Y? What do we think this character kind of embodies, narratively? It's really fun. and I hope it comes back. But I digress. That's Codex in... I'm not going to say that's a nutshell. I'm going to say that's like, you know, a coconut. Because I talk too much for it to fit in a singular nutshell. But yeah, they're great. Good people. Good people doing good stuff. And I would love to... I should pitch those writing workshops again. Because, like, not all of us are writers, but, like, enough of us are that we could do it on stream. I still think there's several people in the Codex who would absolutely love solo tabletop RPGs. But I get it, you know, some people don't want to do that on camera. Sometimes I don't want to do that on camera, and sometimes I do, and that's what comes out on Tuesdays. While I'm promoting things, you know what? Yeah, we don't just stream Friday nights. We also stream Tuesday nights, in which we play video games or tabletop games. Games of a wide variety. Or, lately we've even been working on some sewing projects. I've got some embroidery I'm working on for a pair of jorts. This pair of jorts actually even is embroidered. It's embroidered, like, right here, so I can't really show to camera, you know, on the inner thigh, but it is true. I have embroidered these myself. Is this the one with the flags? Yes, this is the one with the flags on it. I have embroidered these. I put some sashiko on them. If they break any further, I'm gonna do some more traditional, like, darned and whip-stitched patches. Like, so I've been slowly tiptoeing into sewing. I have some sewing projects I'd really love to get done. There's, like, a curtain on the front part of my RV to let, you know, not the neighbors stare in from my car. Because, you know, I'm in an RV, so there's the car part. I don't want people staring at the windshield, but there's a curtain there. Instead of, you know, like, putting a thing over the windshield, because I want the cats to be able to look out the big window. And so I'm planning on making a big curtain for that and maybe making it something pretty. Really, if I had infinite time, what I would do is I would, like, embroider, like, a big tapestry, but I don't have infinite time. If I had infinite time, I'd get a lot more done for the channel at large. Speaking of the channel at large, I also have a YouTube channel to go with this podcast. Did you know YouTube allows you to set a playlist as a podcast now? Real thing. First of all, podcast. If you like what we're doing here, you're gonna love the podcast itself. But also, YouTube. It exists. Unlike Twitter. I can type. There we go. I exist. The VODs go on there. I have other projects on the back burner that will eventually get uploaded there. Those projects would not have been sitting on the back burner for 6 months if I had infinite time. Let me tell you. I have some big ideas that I may be swinging a little bit above my equipment level or my skill level, but I think they're really fun. I digress. We've had our little bubble of promotion. Let's get started. Let's dive into The Second Satellite by Edmund Hamilton. Actually, wait. While we're talking self-promotion, I need to post in Discord, hey, we've started another story. A new story. What is this? The Second Satellite? By Edmund Hamilton. Let me just post that in a couple Discords that I know won't mind. I'm sure Alternate's Discord will probably not mind, right, guys? A couple of you are probably still here. Or you're trying to sleep. Oh, yeah. You might be trying to sleep. But I'll post this in... Loriana's probably chill about it. Another good person, Loriana, actually. Great Twitch streamer. Very much a different vibe than me. Very, high energy, very talks in a Discord call with their friends kind of thing. They try to aim for cozy streams, and, like, they can do cozy, but they're usually pretty high energy vibes, big effort, that kind of thing. You know what? Let's shout out Loriana. Oh, bro, I don't sleep for another 2.5 hours. 3 a.m. Yeah, you do stay up super late. First of all, let's shout out Alternate because he's cool. Fun fact: that heart at the top of the chat lets you follow Alternate, who is a friend of the channel, if you will. Everyone's favorite. What's the word you use? Nisivious, I believe. You've got a lot of energy and it goes everywhere, and you have a lot of ideas, and you stick to those little ideas with your little green flames, and you suck them into your brain, and then eventually an idea comes out of your mouth on stream. It's great. Altier plays a lot of videos game. Just recently you were playing Xenoblade 3 today. Just before us, actually, right at the beginning of the stream, because he's real cool. What else? You've been doing some splooning lately. You finally made X rank in Splatoon 3, which is very exciting. What else have you been doing lately? Have you gotten around to No More Heroes again in a while? There was a stream I missed the other day that like I was like, oh, you're doing this. Can't believe I'm missing this. But Alternate very cool. Alternate very good. Novaturient, that's the word. What is Nisivious? Now I'm worried I have branded you with a poor word. Oh, Google has just assumed I have misspelled Levicious. Nisivious is not a word. Dude, I also forgot about Travis Strikes Again. You got like 2/3 of the way into the game, and then like something happened, and then you've just like completely picked up other games, which I'm not complaining about. As much as I like Travis Strikes Again, I think it was a hard sell for the rest of chat. Which honestly, I think, like, it's a shame because like I liked Travis Strikes Again. You were having a great time playing Travis Strikes Again, but like if the rest of the chat's not on board, it's a little hard to justify. You know what I mean? There's a bunch in a similar fashion. I've got a bunch of stuff at mine that I've been sitting on these on the shelf for like approximately forever, but I know I'm the only one who wants to watch me play this. Like, for example, Mario Golf. Who's gonna watch me play Mario Golf for the Game Boy Color? That's fair, the coffee and donut chapter. That's fair. Honestly, there was that whole like weird like sound-based maze too, and like the miniaturized city that was like a really like annoying area to work with. It was a whole thing. As much as I would love to see you finish it, I'm not broken up about it, you know? But like there's several games I've been leaving on the shelf. Like Control, I really liked Control, but like the way Control was set up in my capture, the sound was unbearable. So, you know, I have to play Control on my own time. Or like Mario Golf for the Game Boy Color. Nobody remember Nobody remember Mario Golf for the Game Boy Color. Everybody was busy playing Mario Golf for the GameCube. And so like, you know, that's just for me. But I don't have to chase numbers, so I can do things just for me, but it's like, it's satisfying to have people show up and chat. It's easier to talk. You know, there's just games where it's like, I would love to stream this, but I don't think chat cares. And I think Altier is very familiar with that. Because, like, I'll show up no matter what. Like, if I have time, I'll roll up to Altier's stream. I just will. Yeah, now everybody playing Mario Golf on Switch, maybe? Like, if I have the time, I'll just roll up to his stream, even if I don't have a lot to say, which normally I have a lot to say in his chat. Like, a whole lot. You can't shut me up. I will be talking about, like, I made bread today, I had this fun, interesting cheese, my cats love me, I'm gonna do a thing, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I will just rattle on in your chat to just try and, like,
fill air to get other people to talk.
But also, it's just nice to hang out with you over a stream, you know? Oh, Magnus. Whoa, bud. Hang on a second. Magnus, buddy, you okay? Hey, whoa, don't. You. Oh, too late. He puked there. Oh, baby. What happened there? You okay? Yeah, I bet it does stink. Come here. Come here, bud. Hey. Hey. Baby. Oh, there he goes. Oh, bud. That's 3. That's 3 more than he usually does. You okay? You good? You just get something stuck in your throat? Careful, baby. I do not want you puking on cables. That's very hard on the both of us. Are you okay, sweet man? Magnus is not the puker. Usually it's library because he'll eat too fast and then he'll drink a bunch of water and then he'll blip because the food expands in his gut. Hang on a second. I gotta clean this up or Magnus will bully me about it. If you hear Magnus puking, make an alert and maybe I'll hear it. Okay, so this one is just because he was whatever irritated his throat before. There's not a lot going on in it. I probably shouldn't narrate this to camera, but speaking aloud helps me organize my thoughts. Hence why I became a streamer. Buddy. Ooh. Oh, we just ate too much. That's what happened. Poor baby. He is just baby. Nothing else. Only baby. You don't mean nothing by it. Him just baber. Oh. Of course you puke on the single hardest thing to clean in the house. Oh. Grow older and older each and every time you guys puke, you know that? Love you both to death. You are wonderful things in my lives, as all pets should be. I'm just gonna throw this. They have puked on this like 5 times. It's true. Oh yeah. I'm glad you got Darcy to stop. That's really good. I was worried about Darcy because she had it worse than Library or Magnus. So, what you may or may not have seen in shot there, there's a little litter mat and it's got a bunch of little holes. And Magnus puked right on the edge of all the little holes. So, I'm just sick of cleaning it. It's a huge pain to clean, and all it does is hold on to all the gunk and all the litter it's supposed to catch. It won't spit out the litter after it's caught it. Because, you know, Normally, when you buy a mat to go in front of your cat's litter box, you hope and expect that it relinquishes the litter that it's caught and stopped from going onto your floor. This one doesn't. It's supposed to, because it's got all these little diamond holes. And then you move the diamond holes up off the bottom part of the mat, and it's supposed to pour all the litter into your garbage can. All nice. Don't work. It don't work. Maybe it's because the boys have puked on it a few times and I've had to, like, clean it manually with a little soapy water. It just don't work none. Magnus seems to have settled. I think he just ate a little too fast. Magnus. Look at that. You okay? You alright? You look okay. Oh, bud, we forgot to meow. You want to try again? There we go. Can you do it a little louder for the people on the internet? You got one more for me? No? You just know I'm worried. That's what's happening. Oh. The cats over here insist on having two boxes at the same time. We only have one mat that merely works. To be fair, if I had any more space to lend these two boxes, they would love it. But they have kind of put two and two together that there is no space for a second box, and so they begrudgingly share, very begrudgingly. I have to occasionally stop this one from getting too territorial. But they are normally very good about it, and they only occasionally have little spats about it right when I change the box. Yeah, lie down. That's a good spot for baby. That's a great spot for baby. Look at him. He's doing his little emote pose. Look at that. Aren't we cute? Look at this man. He's looking right up at the camera, too. Well, he was looking right up at the camera. Yeah, you know where everything is, don't ya? Yeah, look at him purring. I don't know if you can see. Maybe let me put on... Do I still have this? Yeah, look at him. Can you guys see his little chest purring right there? Yeah. Comfy boy. Aren't ya? Can you tell I love my cats? Apparently you should have a box per cat plus one extra. I don't know who said that. It was the standard, but they use both when they go. Him comfy. Him will be eepy by the time we are done. Yeah, you want to look up at the people? Here. You're going to look up at the people. We should let them see you. Look at him. He is little. Yeah. Alright, okay. I don't mind fawning over baby boy, for he is a sweethearted little man. Yeah, there goes Magnus, by the way. He's cleaning. You might be able to see him in the corner of the shot there. You good, bud? Did something get up in your throat wrong? Oh, there he goes. Now him even. Alright. Much as I would love to sit here for the next 2 hours and fawn over my cat, let's read the book that I said. Let's read the story I said I was gonna read, maybe, huh? The Second Satellite by Edmund Hamilton. Norman and Hackett, bulky in their thick flying suits, seemed to fill the little office. Across the room, Harding, the field superintendent, contemplated them. Two planes were curving up into the dawn together from the field outside, their motors thunderous as they roared over the building. When their clamor had receded, Harding spoke. I don't know which of you two is crazier. You, Norman, to propose a fool trip like this, or you, Hackett, to go with him? Hackett grinned, but the long, lean face of Norman was earnest. Well, no doubt it sounds all a little insane, but I'm convinced I'm right. Magnus is like, I made an oopsie. I got a tiny myself. It's true. At least you're cleaning yourself. Magnus is actually very fastidious about being clean. He will, if one of the two of them pukes, will try to find something to pick up and put over top the puke, which, like, bless his little heart. He's trying. He's trying. But it usually makes a bigger mess. I had a rug. When I first moved into this RV, right? I had a rug. I had a rug that ran right here, right in front of my desk, and it caught all the little foot crumbs as I came in from the door. First drive, this one peed under the desk because he was panicking because he'd never done it before. Which, you know. And over the course of a 8-hour drive, Magnus first pulled the rug over the pee and then proceeded to bunch the rug up over the pee such that the pee was no longer on the floor, but it completely ruined the rug. And he will regularly, like, I have to make sure there are not loose items on the floor near where library traditionally pukes, because otherwise, baby boy this one will puke, and then that one will go, I helping. And he will put something over top of the puke, and then I will amble back in here, because I've been out of the house every time this happens. I will amble back in here and go, huh, look at that. No more puke. Good job, boys. And then I will lift up a thing that is slightly out of place, and I'll be like, I didn't leave that there. The boys must have been zooming. And then I'll lift it up, and there will be a little surprise under there. I'll be like, thank you for trying. Love you two so much. Not to mention the fact that they have, like, literally diametrically opposed enrichment needs. That's a whole other thing. But I do my best. It's what I get for having 2 cats in an RV. Isn't it? Oh, yeah. Oh, Papa Couch, we're really in it now. They hear the neighbors knocking around outside, and they're like, what's going on? Anyway, this Norman guy had a crazy idea. The field superintendent shook his head. Norman, you ought to be writing fiction instead of flying. A second satellite, the fellas and others on it? What the devil? Well, what other theory can account for their disappearance? You know, since the new X-type planes are introduced, hundreds of flyers all over the Earth been trying for altitude records in them. 25 miles, 30, 35. Records have been broken every day, but out of the hundreds of flyers who've gone up to immense heights, 4 have never come down and never been seen again. 1 vanished over northern Sweden, 1 over Australia, 1 over lower California, and 1 fellows himself right here over Long Island. This guy doesn't have a Long Island accent, but that's fine. You saw the globe on which I marked them 4 spots. You saw that when they connected, they form a perfect circle around the Earth. Only explanation is that with 4 flyers, when they reached 40 miles up, were caught by somebody moving around the Earth in that orbit. Some kind of unknown moon. It's inside the atmosphere, circling the Earth. A second satellite of Earth whose existence, as until now, never been suspected. Harding shook his head again. Norman, your theory would be all right if it weren't for the cold fact that no satellite's ever been known. Long Island accent just channel me, says Altier. That's fair. You grew up, like, near Long Island? I forget you from New York, because, like, I'm used to you being from Florida, right? Because that's when I found your stream, but, like, you're from New York. Baby, what are we doing? Excuse me. What are you eating? Yeah, you. The one who puked earlier. What are you eating? Come here. Come to Dad. I know you understand me. There we go. It just had to process, didn't it? Good boy. Come here. Hi. What were we trying to eat on the floor? No beans? What do we think, Toesies? He's got feelings. Someone told me I had an accent, and I told them that. I went, oh yeah, well, I knew it was Long Island. Sure, okay, buddy. Like, to be fair, New York kind of has, like, a very bonk, it's very, like, long O's, but, like, it's not as obvious as all this every time, you know? This is kind of the very stereotypical, like, I called them on the phone, long, like, you know, this is the stereotypical, like, I'm from New Jersey, and that's kind of near New York, it's fine. Long, with a U and a G, you know? But it's usually not as obvious as that, in the same way that someone from the South don't really never talk this way, you know? They don't really take this long to say things, and it ain't never this obvious that someone's from the South. And in the same way, you know, I kind of slid a little Long Island there, but if I pitch my normal speaking voice into my nose a little bit, and I think, you know, it's a little bit Midwestern. Ooh, that several of those intonations were not correct, but you know, the Midwest accent is not this obvious. You know, but this is how you get across, like, oh, somebody's from Minnesota. You know, you pitch it up into your nose, you squint a little, and you go, ooh, you think, ooh, Minnesota. You know, but it's, you know, accents are not as obvious as the stereotypical accent you put on ever. The speech does not slow down. Fast Southern accent makes me chuckle because, like, people have this expectation that the people from the South speak slowly, when really they're speaking just as fast as you or me, and they're you know, talking about this and that and the other thing, and they're talking about, well, yeah, the other day, you know, I was having trouble with the armadillos, and you know, the armadillos, they keep digging these holes in my yard, and I keep turning my ankle in these armadillo holes in my backyard, and I had it about up to here, you know. They're speaking much more quickly than you'd expect. Honestly, the Minnesota accent's very funny to put on for me because it reminds me of my extended family. Just look at the dude from the King of the Hill. Yeah, and you know, the dangle of this and that and the boomhauer, and you know, I was gonna sit on this here couch, but you know what the government says about that, you know, this and that and the other thing. You know. But it's really fun. It makes me laugh to put on, like, a stereotypical Minnesota accent because I'm not from Minnesota. But, like, some of my extended family, they speak with a strong enough Midwestern accent that it leans Minnesota. and, and so it makes me laugh when I'm thinking about, you know, oh yeah, you know, we're gonna have ourselves some Watergate salad. I keep like bringing it out too wide and like coming out a little like Boston. But you know, if you think about it, you can take your tater tot hot dish to the potluck, and you're gonna make yourself a salad in that doesn't have any vegetables in it. It's just pistachio and Cool Whip and pineapple, and you can't forget the pineapple. Some people really say, oh, I don't want the pineapple. Some people are me. But, you know, the pineapple really rounds out the pistachios, don't you know? And you really gotta make sure you eat your food, because it's very important that you get your roughage. Did you get some of that iceberg lettuce on the table? It's very important. You know, we put the slice of the iceberg lettuce in the middle of the table, and then there's the western dressing next to it, and we all take pieces. You gotta have your roughage. You'll get all backed up.
Oh man, and it just and I've been resisting the urge to make like a tabletop character have that accent because literally I just need to stop thinking about how I say things and then my accent comes back.
Which, like, I do have a Midwestern accent, you know? there are certain vowels I say that come across very Midwestern, especially if I'm very enthused or very mad about something. I will slip into a much broader Midwestern accent, and you can tell exactly from where I live, or from where I lived when I was like learning English. And Razmatazik will attest. When I am very incensed about something, I have a very broad accent. The other day, right? I was uh I was parked near a county fair because sometimes RV parks are like that. And I was parked near a county fair and I kept hearing these like stock cars. And Raz is like, "What is that noise? Is someone drilling something like every 5 seconds?" I'm like, "Oh, it's just the stock cars." And she's like, "What do you mean?" So I had to explain like the concept of stock cars, like the concept of a stock car race at a county fair, right? And then like she was like, "Okay, I think I get it. It's kind of like NASCAR." And I'm like, "Oh, don't get me started on NASCAR." And because she had a lot of time in her night, and we indulge each other in that fashion of like, "I have a big opinion about this. Can I talk to you about it for about an hour?" And so she unintentionally was like, "What do you mean, don't get me started on NASCAR?" And I took that as my cue of, "Oh, I can talk to you about how I feel very strongly about NASCAR for the next hour and a half." And so, because I used to be a huge fan of NASCAR when I was about yay big, when I was in middle school, basically. And so I have very, very strong feelings on the NASCAR rules switch that happened in about 2008. And I'd forgotten that I have very strong feelings on that. So as I'm explaining more and more of what I know about NASCAR to Raz, my accent is getting broader and broader, and I'm speaking faster and faster and using more and more of my hands, and I'm getting a little red. And eventually I get to a stopping point, and like by the end of this whole like spiel, I literally said unironically, "It ain't right and I don't like it." And she kind of looked at me. And you know how you can't really look somebody up and down over a video call, but you can kind of give them that look that gives them the sense of like, you know. She kind of gave me that look, and she was like, "Do you know how strong your accent is right now?" And I was like, I didn't notice it until you said anything, but I sound very much like I live outside a town of 100 people right about now. And like, that's not to say that you lot have not heard my accent before. There's definitely some things I've gotten very enthused about. But like, it's so funny to me because like I like to think that I speak pretty like close to the general American. It's not like full newscasterian diction, but I like to think that my accent is very like I could be anywhere that does not have a defined accent. But then I start talking about certain things, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, you can tell where I live. You can tell where I'm from." But it's really funny because you can also tell a little bit of where I've been in that too. Because like, there it is. I use like as a filler word rather than or because I was taught in school for public speaking, and are terrible filler words because you're just and a lot of people have been taught this. I have opinions on the use or lack thereof of filler words and whether it makes you sound dictate and whether it means you are actually dictate and understanding of the concepts you're speaking of. But I digress. Normally, someone from my linguistic range would go, every time they are like searching for a word or they need a second to stop in their sentence where you would like normally throw a comma in a written sentence to breathe and pause and get all your words in order and say the second half of what you're saying. But because I spend so much time on the internet, and by extension of that, around people from California, the Pacific Northwest, the Western Coast. I use like as a filler word, and you've heard it like 4 times in the process of me telling this. And so it's very interesting to me because, you know, I have to listen to myself when I'm recording, when I am editing said recordings. I hear a lot of my own speech. And so it's very interesting to me because normally my accent would be, if this bubble is America, right? My accent would be right about here, normally. If it was fully where I am from, my accent, it'd be right about here, maybe right about here. But because of the places I have been and the people I spend time with, my accent instead sounds like it's halfway between here and the West Coast. I sound like I live in Reno. And I've taken, like, you know, there's a dialect quiz floating around that's like, well, we can guess roughly where you live based on the way you call things. And every time I have taken it, I've gotten Reno. I have tried to intentionally pick, oh yeah, this is what I'd say if I was at home for 6 weeks and only talking to my family type thing. But I get Reno every time because my accent is almost precisely halfway between the West Coast and the Midwest. Oh, you gonna get him, Magnus? Man, we've been completely off topic for like an hour, haven't we? We've been like completely off topic for an hour. Let me just change the category to just chatting, and I'm just gonna talk, and we're just gonna, you know, wing it. Just chatting. Like, I've been off topic long enough that we have not been doing the podcast. Let's be real. I'm gonna keep the recording on because this is still needs to be a VOD, but the podcast schedule will reflect what's happening. It's so funny. It's so funny because, like, there it is again. You know, I will stutter. This is relatively new in my life. My brother has had a stutter like that for a while, where he will get stuck while his brain is putting together the next sentence. And at some point, that has also happened to me. Because, like, I like to talk very, very quickly, and I like to get a little bit ahead of my brain sometimes, especially when I'm on camera, especially when I'm enthused and I'm putting a lot of energy into something. And so, like, words, sometimes I will get stuck on them. Like, what's a good one? The other day I was doing something on camera and I went this, and like there was a little voice in the back of my head that's like, that's a stutter, you know? And I was like, wait a minute, that is a stutter. Because it's not like it's a medical stutter. It is literally my brain skipping because I have taken the needle of my thought too far ahead of where it should be on the disc. And so my brain's like, put your thoughts together before you speak them, sir. Oh, Zoomies. Zoomies at this hour? What time is it here? 10 o'clock. You guys are about, like, an hour early for Zoomies. Can we maybe wait? Now, boys, if you're gonna tussle, you need to do it where I can't see you. Because if you do tussle where I see you, you're gonna make me want to moderate. And that makes it no fun for the both of you, because I know you two are play fighting. But I'm still gonna be like, don't do that. You know? Which, like, you know how cats are. It's like 2 cats in a room. They want to, you know, goof off and blow off some energy. I mean, especially in a space this small, they have a lot of energy to blow off. And so they are goofing around, and they should be able to moderate themselves. There's a little voice in the back of my head that's like, don't let them fight. Don't let them do that. And so I consistently insist that these two fight in a way that I cannot see them, because then they can continue to self-govern and handle their problems. Which, they're such siblings. They're such siblings. Like, I don't know how many of you in chat are, like, single children, you know? You grew up as an only child, but, like, siblings have a very particular way of going about things. And part of that is you spent a vast quantity of, and maybe this is just me speaking because I grew up male because I'm cis male, but like part of that is neither of your brains have finished cooking, and one of your brains is slightly farther along than the others, but neither of you are done cooking well enough to be like, maybe we shouldn't beat each other up like this. And especially if you are a small child like I was, who did not have very great emotional regulation, which, you know, I'm an adult, I've worked on that. I'm working on that, I continue to, you know, as adults do. But like as a kid, I had very poor emotional regulation because I had a lot less experience having emotion, and like, you know, I had a lot less experience experiencing sensations, and so like I had a lot less grasp on my ability to, you know, validate and process the things that are coming into my brain. And so I was very easily angered as a child. And so my younger brother, you know, is very familiar with how we both did not have enough brain in our head to go, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And I will not tell any specific stories, mostly because I don't want to, A, paint myself in a bad light like that, and B, I don't want to tell those stories without my little brother being like, yeah, tell that story, it's funny. I'm more concerned about my younger brother, to be honest. Like, how many hours have I spent on camera with you guys? It's, y'all know who I am. But, like, I don't want to do that to my younger brother. I have not exactly painted him in the most favorable light on camera several times. And so I'm thinking like, maybe I should be a little better about that.
What do you think, library? Yeah, I don't want to pay attention to baby. He's like, Magnus is running around, and I want to run around. Are you sure you need to pet me right now?
I don't know what my sis and I had, but it must have been siblingry. It really is like, you know, we joke in our media about like, you know, sibling rivalry and all that, but like the actual sibling, like the actual, you know, essence of a sibling rivalry. Also, we're not reading this book. We're not reading this book. Let's just sit here. Uh, you know, the actual essence of a sibling rivalry turns on a very different axis than the commercial sense of a sibling rivalry, and I think it's hard because like the sibling rivalry is so like unique to each set of siblings, so you can't really get across a really good one. But like there are certain tropes you could lean on that they don't really lean on. For example, like like I don't think I've ever called my brother like little bro unless I was like in a real like I'm emulating media kind of mood, right? And so like you know, you develop stupid nicknames for each other. Like I don't have any examples from my brother, but like, well, yeah, no, and like, yeah, absolutely, like you would call them like bro or like sis as like a joke because you're goofing off, and like, you know, you come up with stupid nicknames for each other, and like the thing with my brother is he is also very willing to like think of a bit, think it is very funny, and then immediately commit to the bit whether anyone else in the room finds it funny. That's something we have in common. And that's something that I think drives a lot of people that know me crazy. We'd quote rocket powered each other while playing Mario Kart Double Dash. That's cute. That's fun. Hey, it's Jeannie. Hello. You caught us, unfortunately, not reading. I decided that I had been distracted over a volume of Critical Time, and so now we're just talking. Um, hi, hello. Yeah, like, my brother is also very willing to, like, get a little funny thought in his head and then go, that's funny, I'm gonna commit. Like, for a while when we were, like, I think this was, like, middle high school age for both of us, because like he's 5 years younger than me, so he's, you know, he's fully a Gen Z kid. Like, a bit that he was doing, and like, I don't know if he was doing it for fun or if he was like, yes, this is how I'm gonna be cool. But like, in hindsight, it really feels like a bit that he was like, he started out doing like, I'm gonna be cool, and then he just like stuck to it for the irony of it all. And I'd have to ask him, this is something that like I would not be able to know from the outside perspective. But for a good hot minute there, he was like, call me Big Red, because we both have red hair. Like, my red hair is not as obvious as his, because he actually goes outside. But he was like, call me Big Red, and so, like, that was a thing. Like, he was like, this is my funny nickname, and I'm like, alright, yes, that is your funny nickname. And so for a while, I would call him Big Red. And, like, granted, we wouldn't run into each other a lot, because, like, he's an extrovert and I'm not, so I sit in the house a lot. But, it's a thing. Like, siblings do not call each other bro and sis. I'm like, you have not talked to people about their siblings very much, have you? When I catch that in writing, or I'm like, you don't care about that detail, and it does not serve the story going forward. But, like, for example, that would be a really good way to, like, if you wanted to do the evil sibling trope, right? And sibling A does not know that sibling B is the evil character, right? That'd be a really good way to, like, accidentally, like, reveal that to the main character. Is, like, their sibling using a name for them that nobody else uses because it's a sibling name. That'd be a really good way to reveal that. That's pretty comic books, actually. We should, next time we pick up a comic book-based solo tabletop game, I might keep that in the back of my head. Also, I hope you sleep well, Genie Problem. I'm glad you dropped by. Tonight has been very, very bubbly burbly. I don't know what it is. Maybe I just haven't been streaming enough. Because normally I'm very, like, there's a reason I read books. But, like, maybe I haven't been doing my Tuesday streams enough, and so I'm just like, But, like, yeah. You know what else? Oh no, I lost my thought. It was something about solo tabletop games. That was what it was. Like, VTubers generally are very famous for, like, having, you see 5% of their lore. There's, like, 95% of what they have planned. Thankfully, we've chased down the brain thought and grabbed it out of the tree and been like, thought, I have acquired. Thought in brain, yes. But, like, VTubers tend to overplan lore, and in the same way, tabletop games, I think, so, like, I have a homebrew D&D setting that I'm in the Okay, I can understand why Automod said don't do that, but I'm keeping it. But, like, I have a homebrew D&D setting that I'm in the process of, like, I've borrowed bits and pieces of the existing 5e, like, some existing 5e stuff. Actually, I don't know if it's canon to 5e. It was canon to 4e and 3.5. But I'm in the process of filing the serial numbers off that. It's not done yet. But I ran some players through it, right? Because, like, I wanted players to expand the world, because that's a great way to expand your D&D world, is you lay down the base of, like, this is the map, this is where the people are, this is a little bit of what the people are like, and then you throw players at it to fill in, like, blanks that you didn't know were there. And so, in this D&D setting, for every, like, 5% that the players know about or have expanded on unknowingly, there's 95% of the setting that they just do not know about. And so I am told VTubers are the same way. Like, I know for a fact Altair has vast volumes of lore that you just haven't gotten to yet, or is, like, partially written. Like, you've mentioned on the Discord, and, like, Lumi, for example. Like, Lumi has a whole entire D&D setting that she's running, like, a table through right now that ties into Lumi as a character and the world of Brand New that we just don't know about. Like, for every, like, one thing that I'm like, oh, lore, grab, give lore, want to know thing, there's like 15. My best friend is Notepad apps, relatable content. Relatable content. Like, I'm constantly typing, like, little ideas into my phone, or, like, little ideas into a Discord that I have for all my little ideas, or, like, sometimes if I am, like, if I know I'm gonna have a lot of ideas, I will bring a physical notebook with me. Like, I have a physical, like, empty journal book that Raz got me, right? Just for Monster of the Week ideas. It's not even a third full, but I have a ton of ideas. Which, speaking of, Althir, sometime off stream, if I'm thinking with my brain, I should pitch some Monster of the Week one shots to your server, because I feel like there's a great group of people that we could run some Monster of the Week one shots with. I think Gogo would super be down. I'm sure you could come up with a really fun character. Who else? Honestly, I think 65 wouldn't mind. Honestly, I don't know. Who knows? Either way, like I would love to run some Monster of the Week one shots, because, like, not only do I love running Monster of the Week, but also, like, it's a lot easier to pitch Stillfleet, which is like a game with a lot of moving pieces and a lot of lore. Ooh, drop a lot of lore if you know how I DM a little bit. So I am down. We should, like, pitch. I have some monsters like that are either have been on the shelf or they're really good to, like, rerun. Like, for example, I've talked about Pidge on stream before, right? I won't go super into, like, the effects that the monster can have on the players in case I decide to throw Pidge at you. But conceptually, Pidge, in a nutshell, is high school kids find nanites, and then in the nanites were designed to be self-improving, right? But then they encounter the human brain, and part of their self-improvement algorithm grants them sentience, and they go, well, if I'm occupying this body, I need to improve this body because it counts as me, right? And so that's the central premise of Pidge. And it's a really fun monster. It's a really great time. And I've thrown it at like 3 tables and it's gone completely differently every time. And it's really fun. But yeah, generally Monster of the Week. If you don't know Monster of the Week, in a nutshell, you are playing an episode of Buffy, an episode of Smallville, an episode of Supernatural. Any show that follows the Monster of the Week format can be run with Monster of the Week. That's how the game's designed. It was clearly written with, like, Buffy and Supernatural as the biggest cultural touchstones, and then, like, later expansion content or, like, wider certain player classes really play into X-Files and, like, Twin Peaks a little bit. Magnus, be careful with that cable, will you? You're looking right. What he's doing is he's sitting right there on the record crate, because there's a little scratch pad on top of the record crate for them to stand on, so they're not standing on my records, because that's bad luck. And he's looking up at the sound treatment blankets over the microphone. He's going, "What if I jumped up there?" Wouldn't do it, sir. We've learned that lesson before on stream, and it was very loud and very uncomfortable, and I hope you don't do it again. But I digress. Monster of the Week, very good. So I don't know when or where I picked this up, but I have gotten into the habit of calling things that I am too lazy to expand upon why it is a bad idea, just calling them bad luck out and out. Like, it's not literally folklorically bad luck for him to jump into those blankets, right? But it is bad luck because he'd jump into those blankets and it would yank down on the cabinet doors and it would yank down on all the cables that are in the blankets, and it wouldn't end well. And so I go, oh yeah, that's bad luck. I don't know where I picked this up, and it's like, it has clearly frustrated several people I've talked to. But I'm just in the bad habit of calling it bad luck if I don't want to explain why it's a bad idea anymore. Like there was another one the other day. I was like, there was some kind of RV maintenance task where I was like, yeah, it's bad luck if I don't do this. And Raz kind of gave me a look, and she was like, how do you mean it's bad luck? I was like, oh, I don't mean it's literally bad luck. I mean it causes this complex thing to happen if I don't do it. And she's like, oh, well, why not just say that? I'm like, that takes too long. And so if I ever call something bad luck, uh, if I ever call something bad luck, there is a 50-50 chance that it's actually bad luck, and the other 50% is, yeah, it causes this actually known bad thing to occur because of this, this, and this. I just don't want to unpack all that because I'm a lazy, lazy man. Also, hi Raz. I don't know how long you've been here. We should wrap up soon, actually. I'm looking at the time, I'm looking at my phone. I should wrap up soon, but very glad you're here. Yeah. Oh man, have I yelled about the new tea? I got a tea while I was up in Portland, right? It's an oolong. It's called Lishan Oolong, which I'm probably saying that wrong. I don't speak Chinese. But imported from China, obviously. And it's kind of like a mid-roast oolong. Because you know how it is with oolong tea. There's like, okay, there's a spectrum of oxidization when it comes to tea, right? At one end is the green tea leaves, where they are oxidized as minimally. Oh, you're still over there. Yeah, I should be done pretty soon. I should be done in enough time to pick you up. Yeah. Yeah, we're running a little shorter because I got distracted in the second half, and we're just talking. Yeah, I should be able to head that way soon. But anyway, Spectrum of Tea. Maybe we'll end off on Spectrum of Tea. We'll see. When I feel like I'm done talking. Spectrum of Tea, right? On one end are green teas. They are the most minimally oxidized of the teas. Like, they are just picked off the plant, and they are treated gently in such a way so as to not oxidize them very far. So you're getting very, like, green, vegetal, direct flavors. All the way on the other end are black teas, better known as red teas in China, which there's a whole historical reason why it be that way, but I digress. Black teas, as we know them over here, are all the way on the other end, and they are the most oxidized. They're like roasted and very dark, and they have very like carmeline and like very smooth, very nutty. I know the green tea I got you was so good. I'll get there. And then between green tea and black tea, which are their own little ranges, some are roasted farther than others. But between green tea and black tea, there are oolongs, and so they vary widely in amounts of roastiness. And so this oolong, it's kind of like I wouldn't describe it as halfway between green tea and black tea, but like it is halfway between green tea and the halfway point between green tea and black tea. It's right about here. It's somewhat oxidized. And so it has a little bit of those like elevated flavors that you get from a black tea. It's got a little bit of that like roastiness. It's got a little bit of the like, what's the word? Kind of like a toasted red pepper kind of vibe. It's got kind of like, but it still has a lot of those like green, vegetal, fresh flavors that you would get in a green tea. And so it's like, it's very like, it is a stereotypically oolong in that it just kind of meets in the middle of a lot of the things you would expect from both a green tea and a black tea. And it's so good. And because it's like, it's import from China, right? So the other thing about tea is there's a scale of quality from tea bag dust to the whole leaf. And, you know, on the one end, obviously, is tea bags, and tea bags you can't see into because they are processing, like, in the process of processing tea, the tea leaves break because, you know, as they're drying, they become brittle. And so when you are processing tea, you pass the finished leaves, like the finished whole leaves, over here on one end through a sieve, and then you get partial leaves, which are usually what you find in like high quality blends or like silken tea bags, like tea bags you can see. And whole leaf teas are usually sold on their own. Like, you loose leaf them into a steeper of your own. And then all the way on the other end are like Lipton quality, like dust. Like literally dust from the tea. And that's the type of stuff, because it's so small and it has so much surface area, you gotta add something to make it taste good, because it's getting all the bitter tannins, because tea is high in tannins, right? Especially black tea, because it's been oxidized. And so you're getting so much of these tannins, you gotta add something like milk or cream. But the higher quality tea you go, unfortunately, it gets more expensive. But as it gets more expensive, much like most things, as it gets more expensive, up to a point, it gets better. And so you have to add less and less and less as you get more and more close to the whole processed leaves. And so, like, the oolong that I got, the more tea I buy, the more I lean farther and farther into the spectrum of these are really nice whole processed leaves. And the oolong I got, they're like a dried little pearl, like they rotate the leaves as they are drying. You get more steeps, exactly, Raz. And so the higher and higher quality you get with these leaves, they will unfold because they've been dried down to like smaller and smaller, like compressed chunks of a singular leaf, because you want them to take up less space so you can sell more of them, obviously. And literally, like, you can pour 180-degree water over this oolong and watch the leaves go from like a single little layer on the bottom of the steeper. Where's my steeper? Is that in shot? No, it's not. Do I want to get up? I don't want to get up. Well, let me finish what I'm talking about. And like, so you can watch these leaves go from very bound up and very close, and then over the course of like a minute, they will open up into the full leaf, and you can see it's like a full, like, thumb-sized leaf of tea. Like, if you've ever seen Camellia sinensis, the tea plant, is actually a pretty common ornamental in like gardens and stuff. So you may actually know what a tea leaf looks like without having steeped tea. But they're about like thumb sized, and they got like little ridges on the side, and they kind of like point up to a point, and they're you know what I mean? But anyway, yeah, I got this oolong, so good. And like Raz says, you can get a lot of steeps out of these fancy teas. Ooh, Yerba Buena. Ooh. Yerba Buena tea is a producer local to here. If I remember right. But yeah, as you get closer and closer to the whole leaf, you can steep it more and more times because the whole leaf is there, and so it contains more tea gunk. And the closer and closer you get to whole leaves, also you can do shorter steeps to get more tea. Especially if you're getting Chinese style imported tea, it takes very well to a gongfu style of tea where you brew for like 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, very, very short, and you add a lot more leaves to a lot littler water. So, like, for example, those tea coins that I've shown on stream a few times, they're about 7 grams. They will make, at most, like a 16-ounce mug of tea, but they will do that repetitively for like 3 to 4 liters of water. And so, like, there's this whole... it's not a tea ceremony. Tea ceremony is matcha in Japan, but there's a culture of gongfu style tea in China that I don't know a lot about, that I'm just dipping my toes into now, that's kind of centered around the tea leaves' ability to do that. Steep over and over and over, little bitty steeps, and so then you get little bitty cups that you spread the little bitty steeps across, and then you kind of like get more opportunity to appreciate the various qualities of the tea. But yeah, as Rose mentioned, I also got her some really great green tea. So green tea season is usually in the spring. First flush is in spring, right? And so about the middle of summer, tea ceremonies are actually what standardized the way they sit on their knees in Japan. I didn't know that. I thought it came from like shogunate era samurai trying to sit in a way that makes it very difficult to draw their sword. That's interesting. What was I saying? Gong Fu tea. Where was I? Green tea that I got Raz. I got it. So, first flush tea is picked in spring, and then that part of it I'll talk more when you grab me. Absolutely, please do. I would love to hear about that. That sounds like a very interesting class of fact. You guys may get that one later. But first flush green tea is like it comes up in the spring and it's like the first flush of the green leaves. And so then it's processed in spring, and so early summer is a really great time to buy green tea because you're importing all this first flush. And some people argue that first flush green tea is the best green tea. Personally, I think it just has a very specific class of qualities that, if you're looking for a stereotypical, prototypical, like if you are thinking of like an iconic cup of green tea that like doesn't have the negative aspects that some green teas have, you're probably thinking of either a first flush green tea or again matcha. And again, matcha is usually what you get at restaurants if it's not jasmine scented. And so I got this first flush green tea because Raz's birthday is in, the beginning of summer. And so I was like, I know, this is perfect. It's in season. This is perfect. I hope you don't mind me not saying your birthday on stream. that is up to you, Raz. But like, yeah, so I got this first flush green tea, and she's been sitting on it in the cabinet because she wanted to try it with me, which I really appreciate. It is so good. Gang, I had like, again, in this like Gong Fu style of tea, right? I got like probably 5 liters of tea out of those leaves. Like there was, so what we had done was, what we had done was we had taken like probably 14-ish grams of tea, like 3 teaspoons, and put them in a teapot that Raz has, and just like kind of split some of the tea. But I'm also like, I run much colder than Raz, and so I can drink a lot more tea in a hot environment. And so I was just like plowing through these cups of tea, like, because your kettle's about like 1.8 liters, I think. And so like I had filled that kettle like 4 or 5 times. It made a lot of tea. And I drank the good sized majority of it, but like it's really great. Long story short, now that I've meandered a bunch, if you can afford it, I would heartily suggest buying better tea than Lipton. Don't get me wrong, Lipton has its place. The like tea dust tea bags, they absolutely have their place. There is an entire like British tea culture built and founded. Yeah, I know. Raz points out, I had like 3 cups and you had like 6 or 7. Yeah, you saw me drink 6 or 7. I I had like I had several more outside of what you saw while you were variously either asleep or not in the room. Asleep for context because I have to wake up at 6 in the morning because my job is on the East Coast and I am on the West Coast right now. Agony's various. But don't get me wrong, Lipton style tea, the like dust, it has its place. It really does. I only don't drink it because I'm a bit of a snob. I'll be honest. You can get by pretty well with Lipton tea. Or Lipton style, like, dregs tea, dreg heavy tea. There's a whole culture surrounding it. It can be very good. I'm just a snob. I naturally have the tendency to be a snob about things. That's just kind of how my personality's built. I like to zone in on all the little details and get them just so about things. And so being that I have recognized that, what I will do is, what I have decided to do with my life is I have decided, okay, I have a limited range of things that I can be an absolute glasses pushing, like turn my nose up at things snob about, and nothing else. so I don't sit here and be like,
Ooh, the potato is slightly incorrect of texture. I cannot eat it. Ooh.
no. that won't serve me getting through my life. So I've picked a few things, and one of those things is tea, and so I have like in on tea to get all the little details just so. And unfortunately, tea is a very expensive hobby to do that with. But it makes for some really great cups of tea, you know? Raz has a really good point. Sun tea and sweet tea are also really great uses for like dreg heavy Lipton style tea. Ooh, posture. Thank you for the posture redeem. I am a sloucher. Ooh, crunch. Raz redeeming posture reminds me you all should also sit well. While the posture redeem is not a thing that you have to do as well as me, no shrimping. You don't have to do it with me, but I sure would appreciate it. But yeah, I have decided that tea is one of my like 3 or 4 things that I'm like, no, I'm going to be difficult about this. Pizza is another one. Which, you know, you can kind of tell the way I talk about pizza on stream. I have big opinions and big feelings on what makes each style of pizza good and what contexts each pizza is very good at, and also what places do it very poorly. Like, don't get me wrong, I actually really do love Chicago style deep dish pizza, but it is contextually a very, very different thing than New York style pizza. They're both pizza. At this point, culturally, they're both pizza. But, like, they both do something very, very different. Like, if I'm in the mood for Chicago style deep dish pizza, getting a New York slice will be horrible. And vice versa. If I'm in the mood for a New York style slice, or any of the, like, subgenres, you know, that other cities have developed that are akin to a New York style slice, if I'm in the mood for something like that, a Chicago style slice is going to be horrible. Like, they are categorically different. And some people get all bent out of shape because it's like, oh, Chicago style pizza isn't pizza. I'm like, it is pizza at this point. Enough people and Moss are calling it pizza. It's pizza. But it is very different pizza from New York style pizza. It is. It's a completely different thing. Like, you're gonna look at me in the face and you're gonna say, oh yeah, this thing that needs to be eaten like it is an actual physical pie is the same thing as this flatbread. I'm gonna be like, you're putting me on. You don't actually think that. They're different. They really are. And like, there are some places that like play to try and hit the middle of that spectrum, you know? Like, if you look at a Detroit style pizza, it does kind of, it plays in the margins a little bit. It's kind of like a thick focaccia style flatbread because it was made out of people, oh, dude. Yeah, that place your stepdad mentioned. We definitely gotta go there sometime. Uh, but like, Detroit style pizza kind of plays in the margin a little bit because the crust is so thick, it kind of makes you think of Chicago style pizza, except like Chicago, it is thick with cheese. It's interesting. So Detroit style pizza is not made out of Soylent Altier. I appreciate the call out, but people were making it out of like, there was some specific thing, like some specific tin in the steel working mills in Detroit that they were cooking these pizza. It's under the sauce! It's under the sauce! It's under the sauce is correct. Where's the cheese? Where's the cheese? It's under the sauce. You know it's under the sauce. Don't give me this. Raz is referencing a TikTok, by the way. It's a guy being like, where's the cheese on a
where's the cheese? Where's the cheese? It's like a guy watching a Chicago style pizza being made, and like they've already gotten past the step of like saucing it so that you can't see the cheese. He's like, where's the cheese? Where's the cheese? And then like a really angry guy from Chicago like cuts in. It's called stitching on TikTok, but you know, he cuts in and he's like, it's under the sauce. it's good. It's fun. But yeah, it's like, and it's like there are micro regional styles of pizza too. It's like, oh yeah, there's Detroit, and like there's the one that's American cheese in a that uses American cheese and ketchup. And honestly, I wonder if they're doing it as a bit. Like it feels like a depression era meal, you know what I mean? Or like there's this stuff from my hometown that's like cut party style in strips or squares, and has the like, it's specifically like there's the edge pieces have like a big pillow of crust about yay big, and so like if you want an edge, if you are a crust eater, you will be taking an edge piece vibes. And like the toppings are under the cheese. Like that is a micro regional style of a pizza. Personally, I would say that my hometown style of pizza is a subgenre of a New York slice, but there are people from New York who would get very mad at me for saying that. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. I got an opinion. I got an opinion about New York, right? People from New York, they're always saying you can't get a New York slice anywhere else. You can't get a New York slice anywhere else. I'm from New York. You can't get a New York slice anywhere else. You could barely get them outside the city, bud. And like, I got an opinion on this. I'm gonna be inflammatory. You are wrong. What I will say, what I will say is that it is a lot easier to find a good slice of New York style pizza in New York than practically anywhere else in the United States. I've been a lot of places in the United States. I live in an RV. You can find a good New York style slice almost anywhere in these United States. I will die on that hill. However, you gotta dig a lot harder the second you leave the New York area. You have to look for it to find a good New York style slice anywhere but New York. In New York, you can walk into any random pizzeria and they're gonna play to form, unless they are specifically like stating on their menu they want to play against the theme. They're gonna play to form. It's gonna be a New York slice somewhere in the range of, hey, that's pretty good, and oh dang, no wonder they say you can only get a New York slice in New York. The second you leave New York, the range opens up pretty wide. You can get all the way, New York level New York slice, all the way over here. But they're a lot, you gotta dig for them. You gotta try a bunch of places to find them. And the bottom end of the spectrum opens way up. There are some bad pizza places in this country. I'll tell you that much. I'm not gonna call any out specifically, but if you're ever in Steamboat Springs, be careful. Is what I will say. I have a working theory of like why people stick to regional gas stations so bad, other than, tribalism, I'm from here, and it involves their food. There's something about regional gas stations. They each have a specific food that's like, you can only get this at this gas station. Take Quick Trip, for example. Even though I'm mad that they ruined Quick Start. That is a thoroughly Midwestern annoyance right there, I'll tell you that much. But take Quick Trip, for example. They got them glazed donuts. They're called like Glazers, I think is the branding. That's one of the like regionalized foods that you can only get that gas station in particular is particularly good at.
another Midwestern gas station chain, Casey's. Now, it's got better pizza than the average gas station. I will freely admit that. Some people talk Casey's Pizza up a little too high. It is much better than a gas station slice would reasonably be expected to be, but I would not describe it as great pizza. I would describe it as shockingly impressive. I would not describe it as great, but caveat, the Casey's breakfast pizza. Now, maybe it's just because I like breakfast pizza. Maybe I'm just kind of a breakfast pizza type of guy. I got a little breakfast pizza shaped hole in my heart because I'm from the Midwest, and that's the first place to do it. But Casey's breakfast pizza is its regional gas station theory food. You may be able to find other gas stations that do breakfast pizza. Certainly you'll find plenty of them in the Midwest. But Casey's is, if not the one who did it first, did it best earliest. It is their regional gas station food. And this isn't just the Midwest. Those are just the easy examples. Take Wawa. Wawa is kind of like an East Coast gas station. I saw some of them here and some of them there, right? People talk up Wawa sandwiches a lot, and there's a reason. You walk into a Wawa and you get a sub, it is going to be much better than the average gas station sub. You think about it, you think about your average gas station sub, it's kind of like middling, a little overdense bread. You know, the cold cuts aren't very good. Some of the vegetables, you're like, man, am I eating iceberg lettuce off the middle of a table and dipping it in Western dressing? Again, Midwesternism. My extended family knows what I mean. Yeah, Wawa is a whole experience. Altier knows. Dude's from the East Coast. He knows. Wawa's gas station theory food is that sandwich, is that like wrap. Their deli counter is their gas station theory food. They do pizza now? I didn't think they were even gonna try with the pizza. Noted. And this isn't just East Coast or the Midwest either. There are West Coast gas stations. Well, hang on, let's detour here before I go to the West Coast because I haven't been to as many gas stations on the West Coast, right? But this isn't just those two places either. This is a pattern. Look closer. Take Buc-ee's. Buc-ee's, you know, that gas station that everybody in Texas is like, there ain't no Buc-ee's, ain't nowhere. Buc-ee's is a down south Texas tradition. I don't know how long Buc-ee's has been open in Texas, but I won't debate them about it. Buc-ee's has got that big old jerky counter, and they got that big old brisket thing. They got that whole big old like brisket barbecue area. That's Buc-ee's gas station theory food. Yeah, Buc-ee's is slowly expanding because their choice of gas station food for the gas station theory is very expandable. And so Buc-ee's gets a lot of love. Frog, what's happening here? Emotes in my chat? What? Yeah, Buc-ee's has got their whole thing. They've got their gas station theory food. Brisket. The best Guilty Gear character. Is it Guilty Gear with the guy who doots? Like he's got like a Jotaro themed costume and he's got a DDD themed costume and he's got the doot move. Like you can press different combinations of keys to make him doot different notes. Is that Guilty Gear? Am I thinking of the wrong fighting game? That sounds like Guilty Gear. But yeah, gas station theory. There's a gas station chain out this way that I can't remember. Skullgirls is what I was thinking with the Doot character. Thank you, Altier. Raz, do you know, have I talked to you about gas station food theory? Have I called out the West Coast gas station? Or was that the one that I wasn't sure about? Yeah, saxophone guy, him Doot. Maybe it was Speedway? Was that it? Or was it Marathon? Marathon. I haven't been to very many Marathon stations. But Marathon's got a gas station theory food. I can feel it. I can feel it. Marathon's got a gas station food. Regionalized gas stations each have a food that they do better than other regionalized gas stations. That's gas station food theory. And it's true. Look at the pattern. You'll see. Anyway, now that I've sounded like a crazy conspiracy theorist about gas stations. Oh my gosh, crazy conspiracy theorist about gas stations. I hope I've told you guys this story because I don't have time to tell it to you. I need to go. But remind me next time I'm live if I haven't told the story about the guy talking about gas stations and electric cars and nuclear energy on the plane to Hawaii. Or no, not the plane to Hawaii. On the plane out of the Bay Area. Remind me next time I'm streaming if I haven't told that story before. It's bonkers. The Salesforce guy. It's crazy bonkers. If I have not told that story, remind me next time I'm streaming. I will tell you guys the story. But I need to call it a night, or I will sit here and talk until I'm blue in the face and it's 3 in the morning and Raz will be like, what are you doing? We have things to do tomorrow. We're going to the farmer's market. Why are you up at 3 in the morning? Because I forgot to stop stream. That's why. Anyway, I had a really great time tonight. Chat, everyone. It was really nice to read, and apologies for the people who were looking forward to more astounding stories. I got too distracted. We will get back to the second satellite next Friday. Promise. We might even not get too distracted. But I will make no promises about that. In short, most of this has been paper cuts. And I hope it didn't sting.